Chapter 3146. Over time, he had figured out the pattern of his little princess. Usually, around 2 in the morning, this little princess would be hungry. Her biological clock was excessively accurate. She couldn't be a minute earlier or a minute later. Speaking of which, this little Yueyao was quite interesting. She was still a small ball of glutinous rice, but she already had the demeanor of a queen. Whenever she cried, if he didn't rush over immediately to coax her in his arms, her cries would become louder by a few decibels if he was a few minutes late. Muyaja woke up at once when he heard her cries. He immediately got up from the bed and, with his slightly messy black hair, shuffled over to the crib as if he were sleepwalking, as if he was familiar with the place. This route had already become a subtle influence on him. The moment he heard the cries, he instinctively felt his way over without turning on the lights. Little Yueyao's cries grew louder. Muyaja squinted his sleepy eyes and hugged the soft little fellow in his arms. He coaxed her gently. Yes, yes. Your Majesty, this subject came too late to rescue you. This subject deserves 1,000 deaths. This subject knows his mistake. Your Majesty, please forgive this subject. When he opened his mouth, his voice was extremely hoarse. The sensor lights lit up. He looked down and saw that little Yueyao's little face was red from crying, as if she had been greatly wronged. Muyaja carried her into the living room. There was a crib in the living room. He placed her in it first, then quickly took out a milk bottle from the refrigerator. He quickly heated it up and shook it. Then he walked over to the crib and carried Yueyao. She was still crying so hard that her little mouth was wide open. Muyaja took the opportunity to stuff the pacifier into her little mouth. Little Yueyao almost instinctively sucked on the pacifier. Her 2 tender little hands hugged the milk bottle just like that as she sucked on the milk. In the beginning, when they were changing the milk bottle, little Yueyao was a little unhappy. When it was stuffed into her mouth, she turned her head from time to time and rubbed against it, refusing to drink the milk obediently. Speaking of which, there was a slight difference between a milk bottle and a human's breasts. Hence, little Yueyao was very disdainful of the milk bottle. However, when it came to this, Yu was smart. He found a spare milk bottle and poured Coke into it. Then, he stood by the crib and started to drink the Coke with relish in front of little Yueyao. Why else would there be a saying that out of someone else's pot was always the best? Little Yueyao was only a few months old. She already knew this. Hence, when she saw him hugging the milk bottle with relish, her originally tearful eyes, her eyes widened in curiosity as she watched Yu sucking the cola from the milk bottle. Craving for it, she reached out her chubby little hands, wanting to drink it. Yu deliberately refused to give it to her, so little Yueyao grabbed his hand and asked for it. Yu waved the milk bottle in his hand to show off. He had an arrogant look on his face and refused to let her drink. Little Yueyao became anxious and started to cry loudly. Seizing this opportunity, Yu swapped the milk bottle and stuffed it into her arms. Little Yueyao was satisfied. She hugged the milk bottle and stopped crying. She smiled with tears in her eyes. Muyaja quickly took the milk bottle and fed it to her. Chapter 3147. Thus, Yin Shirshir had no choice but to squeeze the milk into a milk bottle and store it in the freezer. This was a good thing. After all, when little Yueyao drank milk, it often hurt her. Using a breast pump to suck the milk out would make her feel better. Thus, as time passed, little Yueyao started to drink milk from a milk bottle in advance. Muyaja carried Yueyao to the sofa and lowered his head to watch her drink milk. Little Yueyao's eyes were red from crying earlier, as if they had been dyed with rouge. With tears in the corners of her eyes, she hugged the milk bottle as if she had walked in the desert for several days and nights and finally found a clear spring. She drank it in big gulps as if she was thirsty. What a greedy little kitten. Muyaja gently scratched the tip of her nose. His heart felt as if it had been filled to the brim. But as she drank, she looked at him with her eyes wide open. Seeing that he was gazing at her gently, little Yueyao actually smiled with tears in her eyes. With this smile, the entire world seemed to brighten up. Especially when there were tears in the corners of her eyes and her eyes were still red. When she smiled, it gave off the feeling of being enchanting. She was still a baby. How could she smile so beautifully? This pair of eyes gave her quite a lot of points. The black and white were distinct, and they were round and big. Based on the contours of her eyes, one could imagine that this pair of eyes resembled her mother's. Her almond-shaped eyes were extremely alluring. Just holding this little girl like this, Muyaja felt a great sense of accomplishment. This sense of accomplishment was definitely not something that could be compared to signing a few billion-dollar contracts. When he hugged her, he felt as if he owned the whole world. This was probably how it felt to be a father for the first time. Muyaja had an impulse to bring all the best things in the world to her. In the past, he had been ruthless in his career purely because of his ambition and his struggle against fate. In such a frightening family, survival of the fittest was the law of the jungle. But now, his ruthlessness in his career had redefined himself, and he had a firm goal. His ambition was to give his wife and daughter a better life. Now he had a wife whom he loved deeply and 3 children whom he loved dearly. In order to give them the best life in the world, he naturally had to give it his all. Hence, Muyaja was even more motivated than before when it came to work. However, he didn't neglect his other 2 sons and his wife just because of little Yueyao's birth. He knew that the happy life and complete family he had today were all thanks to this woman. Therefore, he doted on her even more than before, just so that when their hair was white, he could hold her hand and ask her if she was happy with him in this life. Without hesitation, she could say, yes. To him, this was the true achievement of his life. This man was very clear about the position of everyone he cared about. Whether it was Yu, Xiaoyichen, or even little Yueyao, they were all his loved ones. However, they were destined to be passers-by and travelers. When they grew up one day, they would have their other halves sooner or later. Yu and Xiaoyichen would meet their destined love, and little Yueyao would have her life partner. Chapter 3148. When it was time to feed, Yu got up and went to the bathroom. When he walked out of the room and passed by the living room, he saw Muyaja sitting on the sofa and feeding Yueyao. He immediately woke up and ran over to Muyaja's side. He snuggled up to Muyaja and looked at the little Yueyao who was happily munching on the milk bottle. Muyaja glanced at Yu and saw that he was drowsy. One of his eyes was open, and the other was closed. His eyelids were swollen and hazy, and he couldn't even open his eyes. He couldn't help but say unhappily, "Go to sleep if you're tired." No. I want to watch over my little sister." Muyaja snorted coldly and shielded the little Yueyao. "It's not like you don't have the chance to see her. Take me for example. I can only hug her for a while at night." Yu looked at him. From his words, he felt that his father was a little jealous. It was probably because he didn't want to let go of the little Yueyao and didn't let him hug her. Now that he had the rare opportunity to hug the little princess, his expression was guarded as if he was guarding against a thief. It was as if he would snatch the little Yueyao away the next second and run away. How childish. "Daddy, you're already so old. Why are you still acting like a little kid? You can hug her. No one will snatch her away from you." Muyaja was speechless. This guy. Ever since Yueyao was 5 months old, the ban on visitation was lifted. When Yin Shirsha returned home from the confinement center, many people called and said that they wanted to visit her. However, Muyaja said that the child was too young, and it wasn't convenient for strangers to visit her. But in reality, he had his own selfish motives. His daughter had just been born and he hadn't seen enough of her yet. When he thought about how he had to take care of the guests coming and going, he would have less time to spend with the child. He couldn't be bothered to entertain the guests who came to visit, so he made it clear that he was in a state of declining visitors. When the little Yueyao was a little bigger, his excuse would no longer be valid. Hence, on the first day after the ban was lifted, Jiang Shen and Lu Jinyu took advantage of the company's lunch break and rushed over with their bags. Yin Shirsha hadn't even served them tea yet, but they couldn't wait to run to the crib and surround it to look at the little queen lying in the crib. Little Yueyao could already lift her legs. It was said that babies at this age had very soft bones, but she could already lift her little feet. She held the soles of her feet with both hands and rolled around, enjoying herself. Little Yueyao wasn't afraid of strangers when she saw him. She blinked her watery eyes as if she was examining him. When Jiang Shen saw the little princess, he exclaimed and covered his mouth. His heart was about to melt. "So cute, so cute." Ah! Jiang Shen was a well-known lolicon. Lu Jinyu joked that if he gave birth to a daughter in the future, He would definitely be the world's top daughter slave. He loved beautiful little princesses the most. When he saw little Yueyao, it was as if he had lost his life. Little Yueyao had already grown up. Her fair and tender skin looked as if it could be broken by the slightest breeze. It was as fair and flawless as a freshly peeled shell. Other than her frighteningly thick eyelashes, she resembled Yin Shirshir more. Her nose was still indistinguishable, but just by looking at the sharp tip of her nose, she seemed to have inherited Muyaja's high nose bridge. It was very exquisite. Her little mouth was small and cherry pink. She looked like Yin Shirshir. Chapter 3149. They had specially rushed over while Muyaja was in a meeting at the company. If Muyaja were around, he probably wouldn't bear to let them touch even a strand of her hair. Yin Shirshir saw Jiang Shun's eager expression, and then turned to look at Lu Jinyu, whose eyes were glistening at the side. How could she bear to reject them? But do you know how to carry a child? A 5-month-old child's bones are very soft. You have to be careful when carrying her. Yes. I've carried a child before. I know how to carry a child. After Jiang Shun's older sister gave birth to her second child, he had carried a child. He had also asked his older sister for some tips on how to carry a child. Hence, he was rather confident in carrying a child. Yu Yu and Xiao Yichen stared at them from the side. When Jiang Shun successfully carried little Yueyao into his arms, Yu Yu took a closer look at him. She was really relieved when she saw that Jiang Shun indeed knew how to carry a child. This small detail fell into Yin Shirshir's eyes and she didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Are these two guys going to follow in their father's footsteps and become cis-obsessed from now on? However, not long after Jiang Shun carried the little princess in his arms, he saw that little Yueyao had stopped moving and was staring at him eagerly. Suddenly, she turned her head and glanced at Yin Shirshir, who was standing at the side and looking at her with a smile. Suddenly, the corners of her mouth wrinkled slightly. It was as if a storm was brewing under the calm surface. Jiang Shun saw her little face contorted. Before he could figure out what was going on, he saw little Yueyao clench her little pink fists and open her mouth to cry. Wah! Little Yueyao had never liked to cry. However, whenever a stranger carried her, she would be very shy. When there was no room for her to struggle, she knew how to express her dissatisfaction by crying. Otherwise, how could she be described as a noble little queen? Now she was very good at recognizing people. Apart from Muyaja, Gongjie, and Yin Shirshir, even Yu Yu and Xiao Yichen seemed to be condescending to be carried by these two little guys. It was fine if it was for a short period of time, but if it was for a longer period of time, she would get impatient and cry even harder. This little Yueyao wasn't someone who could be controlled by ordinary people. Even Yin Shirshir was surprised. When he was young Yu Yu's, back then, no matter who carried him, he just didn't smile and would keep a straight face, but he didn't cry so easily either. However, this Yueyao was very arrogant. It was not a problem for Muyaja and Gongjie to carry her. However, even when Huajin carried her, she was very repulsed. Yin Shirshir said, Huajin, you didn't breastfeed her or change her diapers. Naturally, Yueyao doesn't like you. However, Huajin felt extremely aggrieved. He wanted to change her diapers, but there were always people lining up to do something like changing diapers. For example, Muyaja, Gongjie, and Yin Shirshir. How could he have a chance? He didn't have the experience of being a stay-at-home dad. Everyone thought that he was clumsy, but who hadn't gone through the process? Moreover, there was a period of time when Huajin went to film, saying that he wanted to earn money for little Yueyao's milk powder. However, Muyaja emphasized, I'll earn money for the milk powder. Then I'll earn money for Yueyao's toys, okay? Chapter 3150. However, Jiang Shun felt aggrieved. How long had he held her in his arms? It hadn't even been half a minute. Why was she crying so hard? She wasn't giving him any face at all. Seeing this, Yu finally felt satisfied. He was overjoyed. Ah, I knew it. How could little sister be so easily hugged? My little sister is very prideful. Not just anyone can hug her. She's very shy with strangers. If she doesn't like someone, she won't even let him hug her for a second. He emphasized the word someone she doesn't like. Jiang Shun felt that he was being attacked for no reason. He protested innocently. I've only just met the little princess for the first time. If it weren't for Boss, I would have won the little princess's heart long ago. You, what are you talking about? You're not loving at all. Why aren't you comforting Uncle Jiang? Instead, you're gloating at his misfortune. Because he can't hug little sister for long. If he hugs her for too long, she'll cry too. He doesn't give her any face at all. Xiao Chen mercilessly exposed him. Yu Yu's smug face instantly darkened. His little face fell as he rebuked Xiao Chen. Do I need you to expose me? You make it sound as if you can hug her for a long time. I deliberately timed it last time, Xiao Chen said self-righteously. I hugged Yue Yao for 3 minutes and 11 seconds before she cried. Yin Shishir found it interesting and asked, then how long did you persist in hugging little sister? 1 minute and 59 seconds. Xiao Chen put his hands on his waist, feeling very proud of himself. Yu Yu's face darkened even more. He glared at Xiao Chen angrily. Lu Jinyu found the two little fellows too adorable. He was convulsing with laughter at Xiao Chen's serious tone. These two little fellows were too funny. Little Yue Yao saw that they were chatting happily and seemed to have neglected him, so he cried even louder. Yin Shishir was about to say that she would take over when Lu Jinyu volunteered. Let me try carrying him instead. Jiang Shen refused. Lu Jinyu said, you must think that you'll lose face if Yue Yao laughs if I carry you. Are you scared? Who said I'm a coward? Jinyu, it's the same even if you carry him. This little guy is very good at recognizing people. If you don't believe me, you can try. Naturally, Lu Jinyu refused to admit defeat. He walked forward and carefully took the baby Yue Yao from his hands. As soon as he took the baby, the Yue Yao saw that it was someone else. However, when it opened its eyes and saw that it wasn't the person it wanted, it seemed to be angry and cried louder. It even raised its two stubby legs and kicked Lu Jinyu fiercely. How much strength could a 5-month-old baby have in his legs? Moreover, Lu Jinyu often worked out and had a lot of strength in his arms. Her kick didn't hurt or itch at all. He didn't feel anything at all. However, it was obvious that the little fellow was very repulsed by him. Jiang Shen was smug when he saw this. See, I told you this little Yue Yao can recognize people. She'll cry even if you carry her. However, Lu Jinyu was indignant. You only know how to make sarcastic remarks. Yin Shishir couldn't stand it anymore. She saw that Yue Yao was crying so hard that her voice was hoarse. Afraid that she would cry until she fainted, Yin Shishir immediately walked forward and said, let me carry her. Our savior is here. Our savior is here, Lu Jinyu said, breaking out in cold sweat. Chapter 31:51. Seeing that I had lost control of my emotions, Han Xiao immediately hugged my shoulders gently. Everything will pass. Although I don't know what happened, Xiaochuan. I will be with you. Han Xiao, will you look down on me? I asked in a choked voice. I really don't know. I didn't want to. I feel like a failure, so dirty. The people at the pharmacy said that my life is over. It will become a stain that I can't erase. What should I do? Han Zhao's eyes reddened when she saw that I was crying. She said, Xiaochuan, don't let your imagination run wild. Don't worry, no matter what happens, I will believe you. Ectopic pregnancy was a terrifying nightmare for women. I didn't know what ectopic pregnancy meant when I was young, and I didn't know that ectopic pregnancy couldn't be aborted with medicine. It could be fatal. At that time, because of my shame, I didn't dare to step into a place like the hospital. In my heart, doctors were sacred. I couldn't imagine what kind of methods the doctor would use to examine my body when I stood in the consultation room, and then what kind of gaze he would use to look at me. So, with that kind of opportunity, I might be able to avoid even greater harm. However, at that time, I was lost and didn't have a pair of hands to guide me out of this foggy swamp. Han Xiao took me home, and Han Zhao's parents warmly entertained me for dinner. After dinner, Han Xiao encouraged them to go out for a walk. This way, I would have a chance. She pushed me into the bathroom and urged, hurry up and take your medicine before my parents come back. Will there be a lot of bleeding? I asked worriedly. There will be bleeding, but the person at the pharmacy said that if it's used properly, there won't be any danger. Han Xiao hesitated. Actually, It's best to go to the hospital and take it under the doctor's guidance. However, I don't think you'll want to go. I'm not going to the hospital. I trembled at the mention of the hospital. Han Xiao immediately comforted me. It's okay, Xiaochuan. Don't be so sensitive. You're not a criminal. Why would I force you to go to the hospital? I glanced at her gratefully. Thank you, Han Xiao. She nodded and closed the door considerately. I sat on the toilet and opened the box. Then, I quickly glanced at the instructions and swallowed the medicine with warm water. At first, there wasn't any reaction when I took the medicine. Just as I was worried that the medicine wouldn't work, about 10 minutes later, when I stood up and was about to leave, I felt a sharp pain in my stomach. What was different from the pain of menstruation was that this kind of pain was the pain of falling. It was as if something was fiercely sawing at something in my stomach, pulling it down by its roots. I slumped to the ground, holding my stomach as I knelt on the spot. I was in so much pain that I broke out in cold sweat. I put on a sanitary pad in advance, but the blood gushing out made me feel like my pants were about to be soaked. I was so embarrassed that I didn't know what to do. It was so painful that my brain felt numb. Chapter 31:52. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I apologized in a panic, but I couldn't tell who I was apologizing to. To the pitiful and innocent little life in my stomach? Or to the bathroom? I wiped the floor in pain, but just as I wiped the floor clean, it got dirty again. I took a tissue to wipe it again. The more I moved, the worse the pain in my stomach became. I grabbed my clothes tightly, not daring to take off my pants or face the strange situation of my body. I wanted to call Han Xiao, but I was afraid that she would see me in such a sorry state. At that time, the entire world would spin, and all the scenery would become blurry and unfamiliar. I struggled to get up from the ground, but the pain made me kneel on the ground. My body curled up like a shrimp, shivering. I suddenly felt cold. My whole body was cold. Outside the door, Han Xiao suddenly knocked. Xiaochuan, how are you? Are you done? My parents are coming back soon. I'm not done yet. I suddenly said with a sobbing tone. Han Xiao, I'm sorry. I think I dirtied the bathroom. I'll clean it. Clean it before opening the door. Han Xiao was stunned for a moment before she suddenly opened the door hurriedly. Did you bleed a lot? Xiaochuan, open the door. Open the door first. But I didn't dare to open the door. I was afraid that if I opened the door and Han Xiao walked in, she would hate me too. After a while, Han Xiao stopped knocking on the door and left in a hurry. Then, I vaguely heard the footsteps of two people outside the door, one in front and one behind. Xiao Xiao, where's your classmate? In the bathroom. Oh, I thought that her parents must be back, but I couldn't open the door at all. I hadn't tidied up the bathroom yet. I stood up with the help of the wall, only to see a pool of blood on the ground while I was unconscious. My lips trembled as I tried to get a clean tissue, but the more I panicked, the more I made a mess. I forced myself to lean against the wall. My vision turned black, and I lost consciousness for a moment. When I opened my eyes again, I heard Han Xiao knocking on the door in a panic. Xiaochuan, open the door. Xiao Xiao, why was your classmate in there for so long? Is she not feeling well? Dad, Mom, go back to your room. I'll take good care of her. I lost consciousness again. When she woke up again, she heard the sound of someone knocking on the door. Outside the door, Su Qi's anxious voice could be heard. He's been inside for so long and hasn't responded. Something must have happened. Why did you take so long to call me? I don't know either. Out of the way. I'll break the door open. I said hoarsely, don't hit me. Just as I reached out my hand, the door was kicked open by Su Qi with a loud bang. He rushed into the bathroom and lowered his head to see me leaning against the wall. I looked delirious. In my blurry vision, I could see his panicked expression. Xiaochuan, what happened to you? When Han Xiao saw me in such a miserable state, she was also frightened. Her eyes immediately turned red. Hurry up and send me to the hospital. Send him to the hospital. What's going on? Su Qi questioned in a low voice. How did she end up like this? Su Qi, don't ask. Hurry up and send him to the hospital. Chapter 31:53. I don't want to. I don't want to go to the hospital. Suchi frowned and said angrily. What nonsense are you saying? Beside him, Han Xiao also urged. Suchi, take her to the hospital first. Leave this to me. Suchi nodded and carried me out the door. I felt as if blood was flowing out of my body, wetting his sleeves. I grabbed his lapels and said, Suchi, don't worry about me, okay? Suchi's face was tense and he didn't say anything. It took a lot of effort for him to maintain his composure and carry me downstairs. He drove here. Later, I found out that when I fainted, Han Xiao was worried that something had happened to me. In a daze, she called Suchi. Suchi received the call and rushed over. As it was already nighttime, he didn't have to worry about the traffic police checking, so he drove over. He carried me into the car, only to find that my white school pants were stained red with blood. I sat in the front passenger seat, looking a little helpless. Don't dirty your car. In Xiachuan. Suchi gripped my shoulder tightly. He couldn't take it anymore. I looked into his bloodshot eyes, as if he was enduring something. I heard him say word by word. I'm begging you, okay? When you're better, I'll listen to whatever you say. But now, let me make sure that you're safe and sound. Otherwise, I won't forgive you, and I won't forgive myself. My lips trembled violently, and I burst into tears. Seeing that I was crying, Suchi's tone softened. I'll take you to the hospital first. Then he fastened my seatbelt, closed the door, and got into the driver's seat. With trembling hands, he turned the key lock and started the car. Along the way, I clutched my abdomen, my face contorted in pain. In the end, I couldn't take the pain anymore and cried softly. When he heard me cry, he pursed his lips. His eyes were red and tears flowed silently. After running many red lights along the way, he brought me to the hospital. He didn't have time to park the car in the parking lot, so he parked it by the side of the road. He carried me and ran into the hospital. Standing in the rushing crowd, he shouted, Doctor! Save her, save her. She lost a lot of blood. I knew that he rarely came to the hospital by himself. He once patted his chest and told me that he had been very healthy since he was young. Even if he had a fever or a cold, he rarely came to the hospital. Therefore, he did not know whether he should register first or send him directly to the emergency room. I suddenly grabbed his arm tightly and begged, Suchi, no matter what happens, don't tell Dongyu, okay? After saying that, I was in so much pain that I couldn't speak anymore. I curled up in his arms, my consciousness alternating between sober and confused. The pain in my abdomen was getting more and more obvious. What happened after that? I lost consciousness. He only knew that when he woke up again, he was already in the ward. I opened my eyes. Suchi, who had been watching over me all night, finally looked relieved when she saw that I was awake. Xiachuan, you're awake. I looked to the side and saw a bag of blood hanging from it. Suchi immediately took my hand. His palm was so warm, but I felt that it was burning and subconsciously retracted my hand. I said, What's wrong with me? The doctor said. Chapter 31:54. Oh. I pretended to be calm and pursed my lips. I didn't want to show too much helplessness in front of him, so I pretended to be relaxed and asked, Then did you lose the one in my stomach? Suchi's gaze became a little unfamiliar. He looked at me silently for a while before suddenly asking, Xiachuan, you're pregnant? Why didn't you tell me? When did this happen? And who's the child? I asked casually. Did you lose the child? Suchi saw that I was deliberately avoiding the topic and hesitated. Perhaps he was understanding that under such circumstances, he couldn't sit down and talk about it properly. He only said, No, it's an ectopic pregnancy. I need surgery. His expression was so gloomy that I didn't know how to continue. Then, I pursed my lips a little embarrassed, but I had to be thick-skinned and say, Can you lend me some money? When I'm better, I'll go to work. No matter what, I'll definitely pay you back. Suchi lost control and said, Who wants you to pay me back? Do you need to borrow money from me? No, I have to pay you back. I said calmly. I don't want to owe you anything. Suchi was silent for a long time. He covered his eyes weakly and took 2 deep breaths before saying in a choked voice, Xiachuan, so is this why you're avoiding me? Is that why you don't want to continue dating me? Do you think I'll despise you? I silently tugged at the blanket and looked at the white sheets unmoved. Suchi, don't worry about me. You don't owe me anything. There's no need to do so much for me. Xiaochuan, don't torture me, okay? Suchi stared at me, his eyes red. He suddenly looked away and lowered his head to hide his wet eyes. He didn't look at me anymore, probably because he felt that he was too much of a disappointment. He had always said that a man bleeds but not tears. In front of me, he had always been so bright and dazzling. He rarely lost control like he did now. I forced a smile. What's wrong? Suchi, I'm really fine. Nothing serious. He looked at me and tears finally rolled down his cheeks. He leaned forward and held my hand. I really don't know what to do. All I know is that when I found out that you were pregnant, and that you had a secret abortion, I hated myself very much. But you actually told me not to interfere. You don't owe me anything, and I don't owe you anything. At this point he choked up and said helplessly, In Xiaochuan, please don't torture me anymore, okay? No matter what happens, I will face it with you. Why are you running away from me? Do you really hate me so much? I held back my tears and forced a smile. Suchi, thank you. But after what happened, it's hard for me to continue being your girlfriend as if nothing happened. If you really care about me, can you do me a favor? What is it? I don't want my family to know about this. I suddenly gripped the blanket tightly and said with difficulty, You know, if something like this happens, the family will be very angry. I need you to think of a way for me. Suchi asked, Do you not want your family to know? Or do you just not want Dongyu to know? Chapter 31:55. Suchi was silent for a long time before suddenly saying, Xiaochuan, do you know? If I could start my life all over again, no matter who you like, even if you're using me, I'd be willing to be used to the end. If I could do it all over again, I definitely wouldn't let go of your hand. My heart skipped a beat. He said, Just now Han Xiao called Dongyu and said that you're staying at her house. As for what happens after that, I'll think of a way to help you apply for leave from school. As for your family, I'll think of something else. It was actually a relatively simple matter to deal with the school. He found a few mature people to imitate my father's tone, and lie that I was sick at home. He also asked Han Xiao to bring a leave request. As for my family, I've also thought of a way to deal with it. Before the surgery, I only needed to take some medicine orally during the few days I was hospitalized. After the nurses left, I changed my clothes and went home quietly. The next morning, I pretended to go out to school, and then returned to the hospital. The nurses were less strict with me, so after the ward rounds in the afternoon, I changed my clothes and secretly took the car home. When I got home that afternoon, I opened the door and found that my mother had already cooked dinner. To my surprise, Linley was there too. She sat on the sofa while Dongyu started to clean up the dishes. Looking at the mess on the table, I guessed that they had already eaten dinner. Linley was chatting with my father. I stood at the door, a little stunned. Then I heard my mother walk over after clearing the table. She enthusiastically poured Linley a cup of tea and said with a smile, Lily, don't be so formal. Treat this as your own home. I'd thought that my family would be worried about me after I hadn't been home for a day. However, they acted as if I didn't exist. Linley took the teacup reservedly and took a sip. She smiled and said, Thank you, Auntie. My mother laughed. Why are you being so polite? As she spoke, she smiled at my father and said, Look, Lily is such a pretty girl. I heard that she has good grades, and is one of the top students in class. In the future, she'll definitely get into a key university. That's right. My father echoed. My mother said half-jokingly, Lily, come to our house often in the future. It's rare for Dongyu to bring a girl home. Since you're good classmates, remember to visit often. Aya, if my future daughter-in-law can be like you, I will wake up laughing in my dreams. Mom, Dongyu frowned at the side. Out of the corner of his eye, he noticed the entrance and his gaze fell on me. He immediately stopped what he was doing. Linley laughed. Auntie, you don't say that. I hugged my bag tightly and walked silently to my room. Perhaps it was because I made so little noise that everyone only noticed me when I appeared in the living room. My mother turned around and saw me. Her expression turned cold as she said sarcastically, Yo, you know to come back too? To think that you still know about this family. Wretched girl. When Dongyu saw me, he put down his work and walked over. He lowered his head and asked, "Where have you been these past few days?" I turned my face away from him and whispered, "I'm going back to my room." As she spoke, she avoided him and walked towards her room. He caught up with me and grabbed my arm. He frowned when he saw how pale my face was. "Why do you look so pale?" Chapter 31:56. Dongyu, don't worry about her. Mother said angrily. She has a home and doesn't want to go home. I don't know where she's fooling around. She's only in her teens, and she's already so troublesome. I think she's grown up. The exams are coming up soon. Let's see what she's going to do. If she can't get into high school, she'll have to fend for herself. My expression turned even uglier when I heard this. Dongyu said unhappily, "Mom, cut it out. Xiachuan is already so old and has her own opinions." Mother didn't say anything else. Dongyu took my arm into the study and closed the door. He looked down at my face and asked in a low voice, "Where have you been these past few days?" I was at Hanzhao's house. You're lying. Dongyu saw through my lie at a glance. You can lie to anyone, but you can't lie to me. Look into my eyes and speak. I pushed him away forcefully and said angrily, Dongyu, that's enough. You're the one who distanced yourself from me. What's this about?" Dongyu's face was ashen as he said, "You're my sister. It's my responsibility to care about you." I let out a cold laugh and ignored him. I placed my bag on the table and suddenly rummaged through it to find his notebook. These were his homework notes from middle school. He'd given them to me to copy. I subconsciously rubbed my hand against my pants until I thought I'd wiped it clean and wouldn't dirty his things. Then I handed the notebook back to him. "Here, take it back." I didn't look at his face, but I heard his voice turn slightly cold. "Are you done copying?" "Yes." "Do you understand everything?" "Yes." Then, Dongyu saw my cold attitude and thought that it would be difficult for me to talk to him again. He took a deep breath and said, "Sleep early. Good night." It was only after he left the room that I opened the drawer and took out the diary. I flipped through the thick pages and wrote down today's diary. I'd kept the habit of keeping a diary since I was in the 4th grade of primary school. At that time, I liked to write down everything that was going well, unhappy, happy and unhappy, as well as secrets related to Dongyu in my diary. To me, keeping a diary was like pouring out all my unspeakable secrets into a tree hole. The diary is like my tree hole. Every night, before going to bed, I would hide in this tree hole and silently tell it about my worries. Because in this world, it seemed that only by talking to oneself could one unreservedly vent one's hidden thoughts. When would even Dongyu be unable to keep everything to himself? The growth of a person was like building a thick fortress for oneself and hiding oneself within it. It was as if the stronger the fortress, the safer one would feel. The older one grew, the more guarded one would be, and the harder it would be for one to get close to others. When he was young, no matter who his friends were, they could talk about anything. They were like happy little birds, unable to hide their thoughts. However, as he grew up, he realized that there were fewer and fewer people close to him. The secrets in his heart also increased, and the burden on his back became heavier. As he walked on, he was already staggering. In short, humans were creatures with strong instincts. When his fingers touched the fire, it would be so hot that he would subconsciously retract his hand. When one touched something sharp, one would be injured. Knowing the pain, one would also know to shrink back. Chapter 31:57. Sometimes I felt like a hopelessly stubborn idiot. I gripped the blade so tightly that my hands were covered in blood, but I refused to let go. Opening the diary, I wrote with difficulty on this page. Liking someone I shouldn't have is like sailing against the current with no end in sight. It's hard to advance or retreat. Liking you and love are the same thing. They're inseparable. If I give up, I'll give up everything. But if liking you only brings me pain, I'm willing to give up everything. I closed the diary and hugged it tightly in my arms. Tears fell unconsciously. The next morning, I carried my bag to school as if nothing had happened. In the past, Dongyu and I would go to school together, but early in the morning at the intersection, I parted ways with him. He walked in front, and while he wasn't looking, I took a taxi to the hospital. Suchi gave me a few hundred yuan. When I took the money, my face burned. If I had the ability, I would never have taken the money. After taking a taxi to the hospital, I obediently went back to my ward and lay down. For the next 2 days, I would sneak home at night and sneak to the hospital in the morning. After school, Suchi would come to the hospital to accompany me. Han Xiao would come too. After what had happened at her house that day, I saw that her face was red and swollen. There were signs of a beating, and I felt even more guilty. 2 days later, I had surgery. Suchi paid for all my medical bills. Before entering the operating theater, Suchi accompanied me to the outside. He held my hand tightly and said, "Don't be nervous. The doctor said it's a small surgery. I won't go anywhere. I'll wait for you here." Okay. I closed my eyes and allowed myself to be pushed into the operating theater. Outside the operating theater, there were a few surgical trailers parked. It gave me the illusion that this was not an operating theater, but a slaughterhouse. It might be a little unkind to say that, but I looked at the doctors squatting outside the door, leaning against the wall. Their sterile clothes were stained with blood, but they could still chat casually with smiles on their faces. Perhaps they had seen too much of life and death, so they took a surgery like mine lightly. After the anesthetic, I lost consciousness. When I woke up again, I was in the ward. I opened my eyes, only to see an empty ceiling. Suchi? As soon as the anesthetic wore off, the pain came again and again. I forced myself to sit up. When I leaned against the headboard, I saw that the room was full of people. There was Dongyu, Daddy, Mommy, Suchi, Han Xiao. I was frightened by the scene in front of me. I didn't know if I was dreaming or in reality. I didn't know why they would appear here. Suchi stood at the side with a gloomy expression. Dongyu sat by the bed without a word. "Mom." I opened my mouth in a daze and spat out a word with difficulty. Seeing that I had woken up, my mother's anger flared up again. In the next second, she rushed over, grabbed my hair, and slapped me twice. "In Xiachuan, are you trying to anger me to death? How did you get pregnant? You're still in junior high school. You're still in junior high school. You're so young, yet you don't know how to behave? Didn't I tell you before that girls should have self-respect and self-respect? Did you turn a deaf ear to my words?" Chapter 3158. My mother was obviously furious. She pointed at me, slapped and hit me, and said without thinking, "Why are you so cheap? How did I give birth to such a shameless daughter like you? Other people's daughters are very obedient. How did I end up with such a good-for-nothing like you? Are you trying to anger me and your father to death?" Dongyu walked over and pulled her back. "Mom, calm down. Xiachuan is still insensible. Don't blame her." "If I don't blame her, who else can I blame?" My mother pushed him away. "Get out of my way." With that, she grabbed my arm and dragged me off the bed. She grabbed my clothes angrily and hit me. "See how I'll teach you a lesson today. So what if I hit you? I don't have a daughter like you. I'll just beat you to death. Once and for all." She slapped me, swearing and swearing. Suchi immediately rushed forward to protect me, crying, "Auntie, Xiachuan has just had surgery. Don't hit her. Her body won't be able to take it. If you protect her, do you believe that I will beat you up too?" My mother shouted hysterically. "If I'd known that you were such a disappointment and made me lose so much face, I would have ruthlessly aborted you when I was pregnant with you. I shouldn't have kept you. If only I had aborted you. I don't have a daughter like you. I don't have a daughter like you." When I heard this, my body trembled violently. I knelt on the ground in front of her with a numb face. "Mom, I know I was wrong. So hit me hard, okay? I won't complain even if you beat me to death. But don't scold me, okay? I would also feel humiliated. I would also feel ashamed. I would rather she hit me hard than say such cruel words." When Dongyu heard this, he seemed to break down. He rushed up to her and pushed her away, shouting at her, "Mom, shut up. It's time to stop." He turned to look at me, his eyes filled with heartache. He clenched his fists and said, "She's my sister and your daughter. Don't you think it's too cruel of you to say that? You." His mother looked at him in shock. She probably found it hard to imagine that Dongyu, who had always been obedient, would refute her like this. Dad stood by the side and sighed. He questioned me. Then tell me, who is the father of the child? Who did this to you? I didn't speak. Dongyu looked at me nervously. Suddenly, he knelt beside me and pulled me into his arms. He said to his father, Dad, don't force her. If she doesn't want to talk about it, then don't ask anymore. Such a big thing has happened, can't I even ask about it? Her father said angrily. If she doesn't tell us who that boy is, she'll never step into this house. Suchi suddenly stood up. It's me. His mother looked at him in shock. It's you? Dongyu suddenly raised his head and glared at him angrily. His eyes were bloodshot and scarlet. Suchi, is it really you? It's me. Suchi nodded and gritted his teeth. So I will take responsibility. Dongyu suddenly stood up and punched him in the face. Suchi, you bastard. I had never seen Dongyu so furious. It was as if he had transformed into a ferocious beast. He pinned Suchi to the bed and punched him in the face. The scene was chaotic. Chapter 3159. The scene was chaotic. Even I was shocked and couldn't react for a long time. My father immediately stepped forward to stop him. Suchi pushed Dongyu away and said angrily, Dongyu, calm down. However, Dongyu grabbed him by the collar with both hands and glared at him. He roared, I warned you, I warned you. Suchi. I covered my ears and screamed, stop hitting him. Everyone was stunned and turned to look at me. My body swayed as I said weakly, it's not him. What? Dongyu was stunned as well. Suchi frowned slightly. Before he could stop me, I said again, it's not him, it's really not him, so stop hitting him, stop hitting him. Han Xiao couldn't stand it anymore. She came over and hugged me, pleading, Uncle, Auntie, I know I have no right to speak. This is your family matter, but Xiaochuan knows she's in the wrong. But what does she know? How much care have you guys shown her? She doesn't know anything. When she makes a mistake, you only know how to hit her and scold her. But who really cares about her? Han Xiao started crying. If one has to pay the price for doing something wrong, Xiaochuan has already paid the price. Isn't that enough? Isn't that a heavy enough price? Are you heartbroken for her, or are you heartbroken for your own reputation? I bit my lip hard to stop my tears from falling. In the past, whenever I made a mistake, my mother would question me angrily whenever I cried. How could I have the cheek to cry after doing something wrong? I didn't have the face to cry, so I tried my best not to. I didn't want to make them angry anymore. Not at all. I had no idea how the farce ended. I only knew that my parents insisted on returning the medical fees to Suchi, and then went back. They left Dongyu and Suchi to take care of me. At that time, I didn't know how Dongyu felt when he stood guard by my bedside, or how he looked at me with those eyes. All I knew was that he was lying next to me, hugging me tightly even in his sleep. It was as if he wanted to give me the greatest sense of security he could possibly give me. I looked at his face. His eyes were closed and he looked calm. However, his brows were slightly furrowed. Even in his sleep, it was hard to calm down. I also wanted to hug him tightly, but every time I raised my hand in the air, I would retract it resentfully. She couldn't hug him. If he didn't approach her, he wouldn't have any thoughts about her. If you don't touch it, your heart won't be affected. We could no longer be like when we were young. When we were in our hometown, I would hug him, pinch his nose from time to time, ravage his hair, and then lean on him to listen to his stories. But now we can't do that anymore. After I was discharged from the hospital, my father applied to the school, saying that I was unwell, and went through the procedures to suspend my studies. So I rested at home, shut myself in my room, and ate very little. Occasionally, I would read a book or write a diary. Every time Dongyu returned home from school, he would come to my room and sit by my side, accompanying me silently. He didn't speak much, and I rarely spoke to him. I would just hold the drawing board and draw casually on it. Sometimes he would come over and put his arm around my shoulder, saying something to me, but I didn't seem to hear him. Chapter 3160. I sealed myself in a very narrow spiral shell, hiding and refusing to go out. Sometimes Suchi wanted to look for me, but my parents repeatedly forbade us from seeing each other. He would call the landline at home. I didn't have a phone in my room. When my mother received his call, she would scold him and hang up. However, he still persevered and called every 2 or 3 days. As for me, it was as if I had lost my mind. I held the diary and wrote. As I wrote, tears fell. I wiped them clean and continued to draw. I asked him in the diary, "Dongyu, have you ever liked me, even just a little? How great would it be if we weren't siblings? If you weren't In Dongyu, or if my name wasn't In Xiachuan, then when we met as usual, the impossible would become possible. However, if you weren't In Dongyu and I wasn't In Xiachuan, would our lives have intersected? Was it really a shameful thing to fall in love with someone you shouldn't?" I knew that I wouldn't get a response, but I still poured out the questions in my heart in the diary. The days passed in a daze. Until one day, I heard some unusual movements outside the house. "Dongyu, what's wrong with you? Hubby, come quickly. Dongyu is covered in injuries." When I heard this, I nervously opened the door and walked out. I saw Dongyu kneeling on the ground in the living room, covered in injuries. His face was covered in bruises, and the blood clot at the corner of his eye was especially heavy. It looked like someone had punched him hard. When I saw this, I pounced on him like a madman and asked in a panic, "Brother, what's wrong with you?" Dongyu raised his eyes to look at me, but the corners of his lips curved into a gentle smile. "That person's name is Fong Liang, isn't it?" I was stunned as if I had been struck by lightning. He put his arm around my shoulders and pulled me into his embrace. He gently stroked my back and forced a smile. He gently coaxed me. "Don't be afraid, okay? I've already taught that person a lesson for you." As he spoke, his voice choked with sobs and he hugged me even tighter. "Don't be afraid. Even if it's hell, I'll be with you." I saw tears fall from his eyes, and my heart ached so much that it was suffocating. What the hell happened? Her mother and father were pacing around anxiously. Outside the door, Suchi chased after him. He was also covered in injuries. His school uniform had been torn a few times, and there were obvious signs of being hit on his face. He walked up to Dongyu, panting slightly. He glanced at me again, clenched his fists, and silently released them. I immediately realized what had happened. I slumped to the ground, my heart clenching. It all started when Suchi and Dongyu bumped into a group of young men on their way home. One of them was Fong Liang. Fong Liang told Suchi that he was going to the bar to have fun, but his car had been detained by his family, so he had asked Suchi to borrow his car. Suchi said that the keys were at home, so Fong Liang said that he wanted to go back to get them. On the way, Suchi unintentionally mentioned my name. As I was grounded and could hardly leave the house, he could only get news of me from Dongyu. When Fong Liang heard my name, he found it familiar. After asking, he suddenly smiled contemptuously and said, "Oh, so it's her." Chapter 3161. Have you forgotten? That day we went to the KTV to sing. Your little girlfriend was there too. Why, didn't you guys break up? Suchi was vague. Fong Liang suddenly smiled ambiguously and said casually, "Suchi, you can't do it. Isn't it a pity to break up after dating for so long without having sex? However, as your brother, I'll do it for you." As soon as he said that, before Suchi could react, Dongyu grabbed him by the collar with an ashen face and punched him hard in the face with a devastating fury. A few young men who were with Fong Liang came over to hit him when they saw this. Suchi reacted, and the group got into a scuffle. However, Suchi and Dongyu had always been clear about their grudges. They were covered in injuries, but Fong Liang was seriously injured. He had broken ribs, broken fingers, multiple soft tissue injuries, and a moderate concussion. Dongyu hugged me and kept mumbling, "Why did you hide it from me? How could you hide it from me?" I hugged his waist helplessly, tears streaming down my face. Not long after, the police arrived and brought Suchi and Dongyu back to the police station for investigation. I took a taxi with my parents and rushed to the police station. Only then did I find out that Fong Liang had been seriously injured. As it involved serious injuries, this was no longer a simple fight between students. Any minor injuries would constitute a criminal case. Soon Fong Liang's relatives arrived. They were a man and a woman. The man claimed to be Fong Liang's brother, and the woman was Fong Liang's mother. The two of them were arrogant and showed off in front of the police station, saying that they would severely punish the two criminals, Suchi and Dongyu. Beating someone up at such a young age? Fong Liang's mother was dressed elegantly. It was said that the Fong family was considered a prestigious family in the capital. They came from the guest house and had a powerful background. I later found out about the rumors about Su Qi. Someone saw Su Qi accompanying a girl to the hospital for an abortion. I asked Su Qi about it, and he said that the girl was pregnant, but it wasn't his. He refused to say who had gotten her pregnant, saying that it was a secret. Only then did I know that this person was Fong Liang. Perhaps it was because of their family background and their father's background that no one dared to offend the Fong family. Fong Liang was the only child in the family, so he was spoiled since he was young. When he was in junior high school, he hung out with the youths in society. When he was in high school, he drove luxury cars to nightclubs and bars. His father wanted to arrange a good future for him. Through his connections, he arranged for him to go to a famous university. However, he was not in the mood to study at all. After 2 years, he quit school and stayed at home. Now that Fong Liang was seriously injured and in the hospital, the Fong family must be furious. Therefore, when they were at the police station, they were so arrogant that they were cursing. Who are the 2 students who beat up my brother? Stand out. I'm going to break their legs today. On the surface, the police pretended to sternly stop them, but they didn't do anything substantial to stop them. It seemed that they were more or less afraid of the Fong family's power. On several occasions, when Fong Liang's brother found out that we were Dongyu's family, he pretended to rush up to us. If the police hadn't stopped him, he would have swung his fist at us. His mother was so scared that she was trembling and out of her wits. Chapter 3162. While I was on tenterhooks, I heard Fong Liang's mother say angrily outside the door, "My son has always been very precious. Since he was young, no one dared to touch him. Now he's lying in the intensive care unit, his life and death unknown. Sentence them, we must sentence them. They're so ruthless at such a young age. Won't they become murderers when they grow up? These 2 students are destined to be the scum of society. It's not too much to sentence them to death. If the law can't sentence them, my Fong family is not to be trifled with. Just wait and see." After I heard that, I struggled for a long time in my heart. Suddenly, I didn't know where the courage came from. Suddenly, I stood up and walked out of the door until I stopped in front of the woman. When she saw me, she frowned. I spoke before she could say anything. "Auntie Fong, I suggest that you come forward and reconcile with our family." "Oh, you're the sister of the student who hit someone, right?" What an arrogant tone. "Get lost." On the side, the man said, "Suing those 2 students for intentional injury, they should be adults, right? The sentence won't be light." After I heard that, I clenched my fists and pretended to be calm. "If you dare to sue my brother for intentional injury, then I'll sue Fong Liang for rape of an underage girl." My parents chased after me. When they saw this scene, they were stunned on the spot. My mother quickly came up to pull me. I shook off her hand and stared at Fong Liang's mother without blinking. "Rape of an underage girl?" I clenched my fists, took a deep breath, and said word by word. "I just had an abortion a few days ago. Fong Liang took me to a hotel while I was drunk. You don't know about this, right? Fong Liang should be 20 years old, right? Since he's already an adult, then the crime of raping an underage girl is much more serious than intentional injury, right? If you insist on making a big deal out of this, I don't mind accompanying you to the end." Fong Liang's mother said angrily. "Based on your words, what evidence do you have to say that my son raped you?" "It's rape, Auntie." I endured the unprecedented humiliation and pretended to be calm, but I said each word with tears of blood. "If you don't believe me, I think the hotel has a record of the room. Also, if an investigation is filed, I'll cooperate in all aspects. No matter how you want to collect evidence, I'll accept it." "What? I know that the Fong clan is quite powerful. Commoners like us can't compete with you." After a pause, I said with a sobbing tone, "But if I expose it to the media, I'll be in trouble. Do you have the ability to suppress it?" Fong Liang's mother took a few steps towards me. She gritted her teeth and said, "Do you think a little liar like you can threaten me? Or are you overestimating yourself and want to fight?" "Yes. You say yes. Then we'll see. I Fong Liang's Fong's mother die. SSSSAs." She acted domineering, but my attitude was equally domineering. She stared at me blankly for a long while. Perhaps it was because my gaze was firm and determined enough to threaten her. She suddenly gritted her teeth and nodded. Okay. With that, she led the man away. Chapter 3163. After Dongyu finished giving his statement, he was taken home. After 2 days of trepidation, the police station called and said that the Fong family had agreed to a settlement. You guys are so lucky. After offending the Fong family, you actually have the ability to get those people to settle the matter peacefully. When I found out that Dongyu and Su Qi were fine and only slightly injured, the Fong family didn't pursue the matter. They were probably afraid that I would blow the matter up. I really don't know how much courage I had to muster to stand in front of them and fight them head-on. All I know is that at that time, in order to protect Dongyu, I was willing to risk my life. However, it was a fact that Dongyu had gotten into a fight. When the school found out about this, they had initially decided to expel him from school. Dongyu was in his 3rd year of high school. With his excellent results, he would definitely be able to get into a key university overseas. Mom and Dad had worked hard to save money, hoping that he would be able to get into Stanford University. However, such a bolt out of the blue had stunned them. At that time, university admissions were very strict about student records. If it was a B-grade student, most of them wouldn't be accepted. Many well-known universities only had a few spots. Even if they passed the cutoff, they would still be admitted based on merit. The student's character was also taken into consideration, and the consequences of disciplinary action were severe. Dad was furious. He used his connections from various parties and finally managed to talk to the principal of a high school. He repeatedly promised that there wouldn't be any disciplinary violations for the next half of the semester. Hence, the teacher put him on probation. If Dongyu performed well during the college entrance examination, he would be removed. However, my situation was a little bad. There was news from the school that I should transfer schools. I had fallen behind in my homework. In addition, I had skipped classes and stayed out all night. The school had the intention of dissuading me. Mom had been conflicted about my transfer. Until one day, when I returned to the study after taking a shower, I saw my mother sitting in my study with my diary in her hand. Her eyes were fixed on it, and her entire body was trembling with anger. My heart skipped a beat. I rushed forward and snatched the diary back, hugging it tightly in my arms. Mom, the diary is my asterisk. How could you peek at it? Asterisk. Peek. Mom stood up, her gaze cold. It's all thanks to you that I peeked. Otherwise, I wouldn't have known what dirty thoughts you had about Dongyu. Dirty, this word had completely defeated me. I gripped the edge of the diary tightly as tears burst out of my eyes. In Xiachuan, do you still know what shame is? Who is Dongyu to you? He's your brother. How could you have such thoughts about him? Don't you know how to blush? Don't you feel ashamed? Halfway through her sentence, she angrily wiped the tears from the corner of her eyes and cried out of anger. Seeing this, I stood to the side in shame. I wanted to explain, but I couldn't say anything. Do you know what you're doing is indecent? I almost screamed. I know. She was stunned. Then, there was an eerie silence between us. I didn't dare to look at her, but stood awkwardly against the wall, pressing my lips together and crying. Mom suddenly stood up and pretended to be calm as she said to me, "It just so happens that your aunt and I discussed sending you abroad to study a few days ago. I think you've lost your mind, so it's time to send you abroad. Wake up your head." Chapter 3164. I was stunned when I heard this. She brushed past me and walked out of the door. I hurriedly grabbed her hand, but she shook it off mercilessly. She walked to the sofa and sat down. She picked up the receiver and was about to dial. I threw down the diary and ran over. I knelt in front of her and begged, "Mom, don't send me abroad. I don't want to go abroad. I don't want to go abroad." She looked at me with a struggle in her eyes, but more than that, she was heartbroken. Suddenly, she put down the receiver and questioned me hysterically. "How long are you going to continue harming Dongyu?" I looked at her in shock. I didn't know that to Dongyu, I was actually a scourge. She continued to shout at me. "Because of you, he almost couldn't go to university and was almost sued. Dongyu has been very obedient since he was young. He dotes on you. But there's no reason for his life to be ruined by you. After a pause, she broke down and shouted. If word gets out that his own sister likes him, what will outsiders think of him? Laugh at him. Do you really want to be a disgrace to him? Disgrace. I'm not a disgrace. I'm not a disgrace. I lost my mind and only wanted to stay at home. I begged bitterly, but my mother ignored me and chased me aside. She called my aunt. Hello, big sister, it's me. About the matter I discussed with you last time. I've thought about it. If we send Xiaochuan to America to study, do we need to go through any procedures? Haha. I've already thought about it. I'm not reluctant to send her abroad so that she can see the world. All right, tell me, I'll remember. My mother took a pen and paper as she took notes. Passport. What else? When Dongyu and Dad returned home, I was curled up in the living room, hugging my knees and crying. Mom was sitting on the sofa, her face twisted as she wiped her tears with a tissue. Dad was a little surprised. He looked at us and asked, "What's going on?" I've already discussed it with big sister. When we return to the country, we'll send Xiaochuan over and she'll study in America with her. After a pause, Mom added, I've already made a decision on this matter. Are you really going to send her abroad? His father was a little surprised. He probably had the same idea before, but if he really wanted to send him abroad, he would feel a little reluctant and abrupt. Why did you suddenly make such a decision? Dongyu, on the other hand, was stunned. He looked at me and then at his mother, his face full of shock. Mom, Dongyu asked, why did you send my sister overseas? I've already decided, so don't ask anymore. No, Dongyu said firmly. You can't send my sister abroad. However, his mother was persistent. Dongyu, I really can't let her hold you back anymore. You don't know she pointed at me but didn't say anything. Dongyu looked at me and then at the diary that had fallen not far away. He suddenly understood something. He dropped his arm weakly and clenched it tightly again. Then he said word by word, Mom, please don't send my sister away. She is an inseparable part of my life. Don't you think it's too cruel to say that? Chapter 3165. I really shouldn't have wanted her back then. I shouldn't have given birth to her. We can't afford to have such an insensible daughter. Mom, please don't send me away. I begged Dongyu in a hoarse voice. Brother, I don't want to study abroad. I begged Mom, but she won't listen to me. Brother, does Dad not want me anymore? Does Mom not want me anymore? It's useless to say anything. I've already made an agreement with your aunt. When she returns to the country, I'll send you away. As she spoke, she stood up and walked towards the room. Dongyu suddenly knelt heavily on the ground. Finally, he broke down and cried bitterly. Mom, I want her. Even if you don't want her, I want her. If the whole world doesn't want her, I want her. If you send my sister away, I swear, I'll be irreconcilable with you. Bastard. You shut up. His father slapped him in the face, pointed at him and scolded. Take back your words. I want her. Dongyu was unbelievably stubborn. You can't send her away. Slap. Another slap. I cried and hugged Dad's trouser leg. Dad, stop hitting me. Stop hitting brother. Dad didn't even look at me. He glared at Dongyu with bloodshot eyes. The father and son confronted each other for a long time. Dongyu looked up and said, I want her. Slap. I want her. Slap. I didn't know how many times Dad slapped him that day. Perhaps it was to establish his authority as the head of the family, or perhaps it was because he felt that Dongyu was too stubborn and wanted to tame him. But Dongyu was more stubborn than I had imagined. Even though his face was flushed with blood, he still repeated, I want her. I want her. I want her. That night, Dongyu was locked on the balcony while I was locked in the room. I leaned against the window and watched Dongyu's upright figure kneeling on the balcony. His back was facing me as he faced the balcony. The cold wind outside the window was getting stronger, but I couldn't go out. I couldn't go to his side and kneel with him in the cold wind. During those few days, I was locked in my room. My mother prepared 3 meals a day and brought them to me. Other than that, the door was locked from the inside. I had no access to the outside world at all. I was quarantined like a severely mentally ill person. Until one night, the door was suddenly unlocked from the inside. Startled, I sat up in bed defensively. I thought it was my mother who had opened the door and was about to send me away overnight. However, it was Dongyu who walked in. He had a small bag slung over his shoulder. When he saw me, he put his finger to his lips and shushed me. "They're all asleep." He walked in and closed the door slightly. Then he walked to my bedside and whispered, "I stole the key and some money. I'll take you away, okay?" "You're taking me away?" I was stunned and stared at him for a long time. I couldn't believe that such words had come out of Dongyu's mouth, who had always followed the rules. "Where are we going?" "Anywhere is fine." Dongyu held my hand tightly and smiled encouragingly. "Xiaochuan, leave this place with me. They don't want you, but I want you. I don't want to study anymore. I'll go out to work and support you, okay?" I was stunned, and tears welled up in my eyes. "What nonsense are you talking about?" Chapter 3166. Dongyu said seriously, "I'm very smart and I learn everything quickly. It doesn't mean that I'll be useless if I don't study. I'll take you to another city and we'll rent a house. Then I'll work hard and take good care of you, okay? Don't joke around." I turned around. "If I really go with you, Dad and Mom will hate me to the core." Dongyu suddenly hugged me and said sadly, "Then what do you want me to do?" He held my face and stared at it seriously. With a bitter smile, he said, "Don't tell me you're really going to let Mom send you overseas to study? Xiaochuan, I'll go crazy if that happens. I can't lose you." I was encouraged by him at once, and he and I simply packed up and left the house. It was very windy at night. He draped his coat over me and hugged me tightly. "We'll be in the car soon," he said. In the wee hours of the morning, it was difficult to get a taxi. When they finally got one, Dongyu said to the driver, "Go to the bus station." I suddenly thought of something and said dejectedly, "If you take me away, what about Linley?" Dongyu was stunned for a moment. I didn't know what he was thinking, but his lips started to tremble violently. "If you can't bear to part with her, you don't have to leave." I smiled reluctantly. "It's okay. Going overseas isn't a life and death parting. I can still come back after I graduate." "I'm sorry." Dongyu clenched his fists tightly, but he couldn't say another word for a long time. Later on, through Su Qi, I guessed that Linley and he weren't really in a relationship. Linley did admire him, but the reason he agreed to date her was just to put on an act for me to see, so that I would give up on him completely. At that time, Dongyu probably felt that dating Linley was the worst decision of his life. If Linley hadn't provoked me to a certain extent, perhaps I wouldn't have taken such an extreme path. He must have regretted it. He must have felt that he was the real culprit for all the injuries I'd suffered. When he arrived at the bus station, he walked to the ticket counter. Suddenly, he thought of something and rummaged through his bag. His expression froze. I was shocked and asked cautiously, "What's wrong, brother?" "ID. Dongyu narrowed his eyes and tried to recall. "I think I left it at the entrance." I was stunned. "Is it a big deal if I don't bring my ID?" Dongyu gave me a conflicted look, and then glanced at the ticket information. He suddenly turned to me and said, "Wait for me at the station for 30 minutes. I'll go back and get my ID." I was a little sensitive. "You're not regretting it, are you? Will you come back?" "No, I promise you, I will definitely come back." Since he didn't have a cell phone, he arranged for me to sit in one of the seats. "Sit here and don't move around. I'm afraid that I won't be able to find you." "Yes." He left in a hurry. I suddenly stood up and stared at his back as he left. Subconsciously, I kept reminding myself that this seemed to be the last view he would leave for me. Reality had proven that sometimes, a person's sixth sense was extremely accurate. That night, I waited for him for 3 whole hours, but the person who came was someone I never expected. In Xiaochuan. Chapter 3167. "Just take it that I'm begging you," she said in a sobbing tone. "Dongyu is Dad and Mom's only hope. He can't be destroyed by your whims, do you understand? Just take it that I'm begging you to study abroad obediently, okay?" It was as if my soul had been sucked out. I gave up struggling and nodded. That night, my mother didn't take me home. Instead, she took me on a train to Shanghai. When my aunt arrived in Shanghai the next day, my mother couldn't wait to send me off. She didn't even give me a chance to say goodbye to Dongyu. I still remember that when the train started to move slowly, I seemed to hear someone calling out to me. A child in the next seat pointed out the window and said in surprise, "Daddy, someone's chasing the train." I couldn't help but follow the child's gaze and look out of the car. What I saw was a desolate scene. More or less, my heart had already withered at that moment. My days studying abroad were peaceful, so peaceful that it was as if I was dead. It sounded a little dispirited to put it that way. But in fact, no matter what I did, I was no longer surprised. Even for the exams that students feared the most, I could always calmly face the blonde examiners and answer their questions smoothly. It wasn't that I didn't miss him. More than once, I missed those days when I was young and innocent. In the beautiful countryside of my hometown, Dongyu and I played carefree, rolling in the grass and scratching each other. In the afternoons, we carried bottles to the river to fish for tadpoles. We climbed trees to catch cicadas. We even secretly set a wildfire behind the adults' backs and accidentally burned down the neighbor's straw shed. The two of us fled in panic and didn't dare to go home for a long time. Go home. I really wanted to go home. I'd always thought that if only I hadn't been born in this world in Xiachuan's name. But that was home, and yet it wasn't home. Every time the memories flooded my mind, my heart ached. I didn't want to think about it, but what else did I have left besides these memories? More than parting, missing someone was like a flood or a ferocious beast, swallowing me up and accompanying me. Until I returned home, I didn't feel much joy. To me, homeland is just a synonym. As I sat in the taxi and drove through those unfamiliar streets, I suddenly realized that I had missed more than 8 years in the past 8 years. After getting out of the taxi, I followed my mother into a brand new, high-end apartment building. I thought that since the old building had been demolished, they must have given a lot of subsidies. In the elevator, my mom smiled and explained, "We live on the 14th floor now. When the demolition happened, it was our turn to draw numbers. The community director said that if we paid 10,000 yuan, we could choose our own floor. We specially chose this floor. It has good lighting and a view room. All 3 rooms face south. We specially reserved a big room with a balcony for you." I didn't say anything and just looked around in silence. Her mother continued, "The property in this neighborhood is very good. It's usually very quiet." When she reached the door, she had just taken out her keys when she suddenly remembered something. She turned around and asked me tentatively, "Xiachuan, it's been more than a year since you graduated from school, right?" I nodded silently. Chapter 3168. Looking at the anticipation in her eyes, I smiled faintly. "I've never thought of coming back. It's good to be in America. It's quiet and there's no disturbance. Besides, I'm looking for a job in America. After I find a job, I'll settle down in America." "Look, you said it yourself. Don't you feel lonely?" "I'm used to being lonely. I'm not used to it suddenly being lively." Mom suddenly had nothing to say. With her back to me, she suddenly sighed. "Come back. Xiachuan." I suddenly smiled. "Mom, you've forgotten that America is my home." I saw her expression change, but it quickly surfaced with a smile again. She said reproachfully, "Look at you, child. What nonsense are you saying? Aya, let's not talk about this anymore. Come in first." I saw her secretly wipe away the tears at the corners of her eyes before opening the door. I stood at the door and looked at the entrance for a long time before slowly entering. Mom shouted as soon as she entered, "Hubby, our daughter is back." After a while, a figure came out of the kitchen. It was Dad. However, he looked a little old. When I saw him, the only thing I felt was that time had aged people. However, I didn't feel much else. I smiled faintly. "Dad. Xiachuan. You're back." Dad chuckled. When he smiled, the wrinkles at the corners of his eyes deepened. White streaks silently crept onto his originally black hair. I only nodded and went straight into the house without exchanging pleasantries with him. He probably felt that I was as cold as an outsider, and more like a guest in this house. Mom invited me to sit down on the sofa and suddenly asked, "Do you want to take a look at your room?" My room? I thought it was fun. I hadn't even lived in this house for a day. How could there be a room for me? When you moved in, Dongyu left it for you. He said that if he didn't decorate your room, this house wouldn't feel like home anymore. When I heard Dongyu's name, I nodded. She led me into the room. Although I had a lot of imagination about the room, I was still shocked when I saw the setting of the room. It had the same layout as the room I used to live in. There was a desk, a single bed, a bookcase, and a computer desk. My school bag and workbooks were neatly arranged on the desk, as if they were made of bricks. Behind her, her mother smiled and said, Dongyu will come to your room every day and sit for a while. Then he'll talk to the photo on the table. She walked up to me. When I was in university, his room was always a mess. But your room is always clean. There's no dust at all. I sat down on the bed. She looked at me and seemed a little uneasy. Then she said, sit here for a while. Mom will go and help your dad. Oh. My cold response made her even more embarrassed. She turned around and left. In her hurry, she forgot to close the door. After she left, I walked around the room and opened the drawer. The diary was still in the same place. I was a little surprised. I hadn't expected the diary to be safe and sound. I originally thought that my mother would definitely tear it up. I picked it up and flipped through a few pages. Suddenly, I felt that there was something wrong with the diary. Under my original handwriting, there were lines of blue handwriting. Chapter 3169. I took a closer look and was stunned. Year, month, day, sunny. When you truly love someone, you want to have all of them. Let go and wish them happiness? But how can there be such selfless love in this world? Below, Dongyu's handwriting was delicate and strong. I once owed you 10,000 apologies, and even more so, I love you. My heart skipped a beat. I flipped another page. At the end, there was still his handwriting. Xiaochuan, are you doing well in America? I tried my best to find your whereabouts and find out how to contact you, but even they don't know the landline of your apartment. Perhaps they're deliberately hiding it from me. I miss you all the time. The deeper the memory, the more pain there is. Pain is like a corner of a sunny day. The more dazzling the sun is, the deeper the shadow. It's because the past was too beautiful that the pain is even more unforgettable. I flipped to the last page. Year, month, day, Dongyu. Have you ever liked me even a little? I love you, but I don't know how deep my feelings are. I slammed the diary shut and stood up abruptly. I looked around and vaguely saw his figure in every corner of the room. The figure who tidied my bookcase. The figure who cleaned my room. The figure who sat at the table and seriously wrote in the diary. The figure who filled this room with all his memories. Your favorite is Harry Potter. I bought the complete collection. You said you wanted to watch a Harry Potter movie the most, so when the movie came out, I bought 2 movie tickets and a bucket of popcorn. I imagined watching the movie with you, imagining the little dimples at the corners of your mouth when you smiled happily. I caught 10 dolls today. In the past, when I wasn't skilled enough to catch the dolls you liked, you always laughed at me. When Wanda department store opened, I caught 10 dolls in one go and placed them by your bed. Fanta soda really doesn't taste good, but when I think about it, it's your favorite drink. Every time I see the bottle, I think of you. Little greedy cat, I bought a lot of snacks. When are you coming back to eat? The snacks are about to expire. The snacks expired and were thrown away. However, I bought a lot of potato chips, your favorite Pringles potato chips. Nowadays, there were very few places that sold this brand of potato chips. Was there any in America? I had a glass doll that I had always carefully protected and cared for. But one day, she accidentally fell and broke. I sadly pieced it together and finally managed to piece it back together, but I accidentally lost it. I went back to the station and looked for you as hard as I could, but I could not find you. I lost my doll. Xiaochuan, I miss you. If I write 10,000 lines of I miss you, will you hear my voice? I flipped open the stack of papers in a daze. The originally blank diary was now filled with the words I miss you. They were lined up neatly. Every word and every stroke was neat and tidy. It was as if I could picture his back as he sat at his desk, writing stroke by stroke. Occasionally he flipped to a page. There were tears on it, but they had long since dried up. I slowly ran my fingers over the lines of words. I wanted to close the diary, but my eyes seemed to be bewitched. I couldn't bear to look away. Hugging the diary, my eyes started to sting for the first time in a long time. Chapter 3170. I rubbed the corners of my eyes and closed the diary. I awkwardly hid it under the desk and placed it back in its original position, as if I had a guilty conscience. Suddenly, the sound of the door closing came from outside. "Dad, Mom, I'm back." At the same time, a woman's gentle voice followed. "Uncle, Auntie, we're back. Have you communicated with the church?" "Yes. All the details have been communicated." The girl exclaimed happily, "How blissful. My greatest wish is to hold a wedding in a church." A man's deep voice suddenly interrupted her. "Where is she? Have you picked her up?" I vaguely recognized this voice. It vaguely sounded like Dongyu's, but his voice had become stronger. When I left, Dongyu was still in the middle of his puberty. His voice was a little hoarse and was in the process of changing. All these years, we had never spoken on the phone. So much so that when this man's voice reached my ears, I couldn't recognize him. I immediately walked to the door and quietly closed it. Then I locked it from the inside. I did so almost subconsciously, as if I was trying to escape from something. Immediately after, I heard footsteps approaching the room. My breathing suddenly stopped, and I found it difficult to control my breathing freely. My mother said, "She just came back. She's resting in her room." "Dongyu, is the she you're talking about your sister who's studying abroad?" "Dongyu, what's wrong with your face?" "Shoo." The man's voice suddenly became gentler. "My sister is timid and afraid of strangers. Don't scare her. Mom, take her to the living room." "All right. Anning, come with me to the living room." "Oh, okay, Auntie." The sound of their footsteps faded away. I leaned back against the door. Then I heard footsteps stop outside the door. The unique sound of leather shoes colliding with the floor made a crisp sound of footsteps. I leaned back against the door and looked out the window with empty eyes. Through the door, I suddenly felt the breathing outside the door become heavier. It was him. I recognized his breathing. We used to be so close. I remembered his breathing and his heartbeat even in my dreams. I turned around in a daze and reached for the door handle, but I didn't unlock it immediately. "Duck, duck." He knocked on the door softly. Through the door, I couldn't imagine what he looked like now. I could only think of his youthful and handsome face when he was 18 years old. Every frown and smile of his touched my heart. However, 8 years had passed and he was 26 years old. He should have grown into a mature man by now, right? What would he look like? As I was imagining it, I heard Dongyu say gently from outside the door, "Xiaochuan, I'm the only one left. Can you open the door?" I turned to face the door. My hand that was holding the doorknob suddenly trembled. I opened my mouth. I wanted to call his name, but how did his name become so unfamiliar? His throat seemed to be blocked by something, and he couldn't make a sound. Fear, helplessness, and embarrassment flooded my mind. I slowly let go of the doorknob and retreated. I looked at the door and the outline of his figure. Then I sat down on the bed quietly and hung my head. "Xiaochuan, say something. Are you okay?" Chapter 3171. Dongyu suddenly laughed softly. It was a feathery laugh mixed with a sigh. "You don't want to see me?" I didn't move. I looked up at the door again, but no matter what, I couldn't muster up the courage to open it. "It's been 8 years. Dongyu, we haven't seen each other for 8 years, but I've been trapped in your world and have never been able to escape. How should I face you? Face your happiness, and then witness you holding another woman's hand, and walking into the church to face the priest and promise your loyalty. Time has not only worn away my youth, but also the inexhaustible courage of my youth. It's hard for me to imagine how I once hugged him, kissed him forcefully, coerced him into loving me, and even asked him shamelessly if I could break the restraints and be with him if I let go of all the blood in my body. Ridiculous. Ridiculous. Childish. Naive. Thinking back, I still couldn't help but sigh. Now, the person I loved deeply was just outside the door, but I didn't know how to muster the courage to open the door to welcome him. I held his hand and smiled at him like a flower. "Brother, I'm back. It's been 8 years. How have you been?" "Congratulations, you're married. From now on, I'll have to work hard too." "Is that so? Must he be so cruel?" Responding to cruelty with a smile is the cruelest thing, isn't it? What I wanted to ask the most was, do you really love her? That girl called Anning. Is she the girl you once talked about? The girl you would meet one day? The girl you would get to know, and then make a vow to be with for the rest of your life? I sat on the bed, not saying a word. Outside the door, I heard my mother's voice. Dongyu, Xiaochuan has just returned. She's still a little unfamiliar. Besides, she must be tired from the long journey. Let her rest in her room first. We'll have a good gathering tonight. I heard Dongyu take a deep breath. The footsteps of the two people left. I stood up and walked to the door. I opened it secretly and looked at his back through the crack in the door. I caught a glimpse of his back. He was dressed in a handsome suit. He was tall and slender, and his neat black hair was neatly trimmed. At a glance, he had the charm of a mature man. I closed the door again and locked it. It felt like I was escaping from reality. In the afternoon, a knock on the door woke me up. I sat up in bed and heard my mother's voice. Xiaochuan, are you hungry? I didn't respond. Her father suddenly said, Dongyu has already gone out with Anning. He still has some matters to attend to. The wedding is tomorrow, so the arrangements are tight. He'll only be back tonight. I got up and opened the door. My parents were standing outside. They looked at each other. I was afraid that you would be hungry, so I saved some food for you. Shall I heat it up for you? I nodded. While we were eating, my mother suddenly handed me a business card. I took the business card with a puzzled expression. What happened? Do you remember Suchi? I looked at the business card. It was labeled as General Manager of Nanjia Network Technology Company, Limited. Suchi. I gave him a rare smile. Suchi? He started a company? My mother nodded. Seeing me smile, she was also gratified. After graduation, I started my own business. Oh. Chapter 3172. I held the business card in my hand and hesitated. However, I heard my father say, all these years Suchi has been coming to our house. This kid is still thinking about you. We haven't seen each other in 8 years. Don't you want to see him? Suchi on the balcony. I repeatedly dialed his number and hung up. Holding my phone, I paced back and forth and leaned against the windowsill. I didn't know where to look. Suchi, I haven't seen him in 8 years. 8 years ago we parted in a hurry, so he was probably caught off guard. I didn't expect him to be doing so well now that he started his own company. Things have remained the same, but people have changed. I dialed the number again, but this time, I didn't hang up. Soon, a man's deep and calm voice came from the other end. Hello, who is this? Guess. You are? You can't recognize my voice. I smiled to hide my embarrassment. Someone threw your business card at my mother's place. Didn't you want me to call you? Xiaochuan. I heard him choking on his saliva. Suchi had asked me out to meet him. He was different from the arrogant and flamboyant young man I remembered. Perhaps it was because he had been through the trials of society, or perhaps it was because he had been through 8 years of vanity and vicissitudes. He was also different from his young and frivolous self. Instead, he knew how to ask for my opinion seriously. Is that skating rink still open? He was stunned for a moment and didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Do you still know how to skate? I can't practice anymore. Compared to facing Dongyu, I wasn't so reserved in front of Suchi. We agreed to meet at the skating rink where he had taken me to the first time. Nowadays, skating was no longer as popular among young people as it used to be, and business was much worse. The skating rink had obviously been renovated, but it was obvious that it still looked dilapidated after the passage of time. At the door, I saw a man in a white shirt and a pair of black suit pants. He stood at the door and casually hung his suit jacket on his arm. Perhaps he didn't recognize me at first glance. It wasn't until I walked up to him with my hands behind my back and said, "Hey." He turned his head and sized me up. His expression changed. Xiaochuan. There was a hint of uneasiness and seriousness on his face. Compared to his relaxed demeanor on the phone, he was at a loss now that I was standing in front of him. I clasped my hands behind my back and circled around him. I sized him up and smiled. Mr. Su, you're very imposing. It's very stylish to wear a suit to the ice rink. My words opened up the atmosphere. Suchi's expression also relaxed a little. He blinked at me. Isn't it because someone asked to meet at the skating rink? I naturally have to risk my life to accompany you, my young miss. I looked at him and suddenly recalled that on Dongyu's birthday, he and Linley had gone shopping at the Lantern Festival. I had sat at the empty table and looked at the complete cake, crying uncontrollably. In order to coax me, Suchi quickly cut the cake and started eating. It was as if the more he ate, the happier I would be. I told him, Suchi, let's go out. A childlike smile appeared on the face of the always rebellious young man. He held my face and gently asked, "Excuse me, can I ask my girlfriend now?" This Suchi was really silly. How foolish. Chapter 3173. You make it sound so heroic. Suchi didn't know whether to laugh or cry. After entering the skating rink, I bought a ticket and changed into my old skates. I held onto the wall and struggled to walk to the entrance. Suchi was already there, waiting for me. "Miss, come take my hand. I'll skate with you." He held out his palm. I raised my hand and was about to place it on his palm when I suddenly retracted it stubbornly and snorted. "Brother Suchi, you're underestimating me." He was taken aback. Brother Suchi, when I was dating him, I liked to call him Brother Suchi. Occasionally, when I was angry, I'd call him Suchi. I was also stunned by the way I'd addressed him. I lowered my head and held onto the railing to get on the ice. It had been a long time since I'd last stepped on ice skates. I was really rusty. I had to hold onto the railing as I skated step by step. He was very patient. He accompanied me step by step, slowly sliding down the stairs. "Everything here has changed a lot in the 8 years you've been gone. Only this skating rink remains the same." Even Suchi found it unbelievable. Young children these days don't like to play this game. I'm also curious as to why this skating rink hasn't closed down yet. I held onto the railing and walked step by step. The road beneath my feet was so difficult, just like the road I'd walked for the past 8 years. It was heavy and unsteady. Suchi mustered up his courage and asked, "How have you been all these years in America?" I replied, "Yes, everything went well." Perhaps it was because my face was too calm that it wasn't convincing. I asked him, "What about you? How have you been?" Suchi said bluntly, "Not good. Dongyu and I haven't been doing well." Suchi said, "Xiaochuan, did you know? After you left, Dongyu seemed to be sick. He went on a hunger strike like a madman. He didn't eat or drink, locked himself in his room, smashed everything he could, and used all the means he could to protest. He told me that if he had been a step too late, he would have found you. He originally wanted to take you away from this city, but due to a freak combination of factors, he returned home and was detained by his father. He desperately returned to the bus station and saw you get on the bus. He couldn't catch up with you no matter how hard he tried. He was frantically looking for you, but he couldn't find you." I suddenly stopped and raised my head to look at him. "Why are you telling me this?" Suchi turned around and fixed his gaze on me. After that, Dongyu became anorexic. Once, I saw Auntie kneeling in front of him and carefully pushing the bowl to him. Then she coaxed him and lied to him, saying, Eat well, I'll return Xiaochuan to you." However, Dongyu still refused to eat. What happened after that? Suchi smiled. Later, Dongyu received treatment in the hospital for a month before he got better. I don't know what kind of agreement he reached with your parents, but he studied obediently and got into a key university in the country. Then he graduated and started his own business. How about me? Suchi smiled self-deprecatingly. Every day after you left, I thought about you. I suddenly didn't dare to look at him anymore. I held the railing and looked ahead. Gritting my teeth, I walked forward. Suchi caught up with me easily. "What's wrong? You don't look right." I avoided him and walked forward. Chapter 3174. He suddenly took my hand and pulled me into his arms. He wrapped his arms around my waist and looked down at me. He looked at me so seriously. His eyes were so dark that they were shining. My embarrassed expression was reflected in his pupils. He curled his lips and asked subtly, "Xiaochuan, tell me, how do you manage to smile so easily? Can you teach me?" I was speechless. Suchi's tone gradually tensed up. "Because just looking at you makes my heart ache so much that I can't breathe." I wanted to push him away, but he hugged me tightly again. I was a little angry, but I couldn't bear to be angry. Rather than being angry, it was more appropriate to say that I was completely pathetic. Suchi looked at me intently. Do you know that your name is like a thorn in my lungs? Every time I breathe, it hurts. When have I, Suchi, ever been in such a sorry state? There are so many girls chasing after me. I can't figure out how I fell into the hands of a girl like you. I smiled. You have bad taste. Treat it as soon as possible. Suchi asked me in return. What if I don't want to? I was silent for a long time. Suddenly I said helplessly, Suchi, you're 27, right? You should be married, right? I'm not married. I've been waiting for you. I pushed him away in a panic and barely steadied myself. With my back to him, I slid forward awkwardly. It's impossible between us. He caught up with me easily, lingering around. I don't care. I finally couldn't take it anymore and turned around. Even if I don't love you, do you still want to be with me? Suchi said. I'll make you fall in love with me. I said, Suchi, don't be like this. Okay. I'm already 23, and you're 27. We're not children anymore, so don't say such willful things. He stood in front of me again and pointed at his heart. You have someone in your heart, and similarly, I have you. When you've let go of Dongyu, I'll truly let go of you. Suchi continued. You keep telling me to let go of you, but why are you forcing others to do something you can't do yourself? I stopped abruptly. He hugged me from behind and said helplessly, there are many things in this world that can't be reasoned with. I love you just like how you love Dongyu. No one can interfere. It has been 8 years. Everything has changed. I pursed my lips and said casually, coming back here feels like I've arrived in a foreign country. 8 years can change a lot of things. Suchi, you still have many 8 years. I don't have to be involved. Haven't you lived well without me for the past 8 years? Okay. Suchi turned my shoulder over and gripped it so hard. Okay. Xiaochuan. Do you know that I went to America to look for you and frantically asked about your whereabouts? I've asked your parents about you, but they didn't say a word. I've been waiting for you to come back for so many years. Yet you say that I've been living well, without you for the past 8 years? Which eye did you see it with? Which ear did you hear it with? What do you know? I'm not doing well anywhere. People are always unwilling to accept things that they have never obtained. Chapter 3175. I pretended to be relaxed and said, Suchi, it's not like anyone can't live without another. I didn't die after leaving Dongyu. However, he expressed his doubts. Really? I looked into his eyes and felt a little evasive. Yes, it's true. Even though I had left him and was in a foreign country, I had never hugged a pillow and curled up in the corner of the apartment, crying my eyes out. I had never lost my appetite for food and drink, staring at the bracelet he had given me and thinking of him. I had never tried my best to earn money in the huge city of Los Angeles to get a plane ticket back home, only to find out that my family had moved and I had lost contact with them. I gripped the plane ticket tightly and cried in despair. I'm alive and well. I smiled faintly. Suchi smiled weakly and said slowly, I'm not. I've never tried to let go of you. He hugged me even tighter, his voice trembling slightly. But I regret it. I regret it so much. This time, I won't let go before you. Xiaochuan, will you be my girlfriend? Let's be together, okay? Whether it's staying in the country or going back to America with you, I'm willing to compromise. As long as you're willing to be with me. Xiaochuan, will you promise me? I stood there helplessly. Suchi used a tough tone and a coquettish one. He repeated it over and over again, as if I didn't agree for even a moment, he would keep pestering me until the end of the world. But I was going to disappoint him. The world wouldn't end, and I wouldn't be soft-hearted and agree to it. I said to him, Suchi, it's impossible for me to fall in love with anyone again. It's been 8 years and I've changed a lot, but this stubbornness hasn't. Suchi stared at me and suddenly curved his eyes. Then, I should have the right to wait for you. My heart skipped a beat. I'll wait for you. I'll always wait for you. I'll wait until you're willing to be with me. My nose started to sting. Suchi, why are you so silly? Suchi suddenly leaned down and rubbed my nose. Because I love you so much, silly. Exhausted, I walked out of the skating rink. Breathing in the fresh air, my originally restless heartbeat calmed down. After saying goodbye to Suchi, she returned to the apartment and looked at the time. It was already 7 in the evening. I didn't eat dinner, but I didn't feel hungry either. When I thought about the wedding tomorrow, I felt a little uneasy, even a little anxious. As time passed, this anxious feeling grew fiercely. I prefer to think of it as my addiction acting up, so in order to cool down, I walked the half-hour walk from the city center to my apartment. When I reached the bottom of the apartment building, I looked up and saw the lights on the 14th floor. My heart was beating like a drum. I took out the key, but hesitantly looked at the dark window. In the end, I didn't have the courage to open the door. I think I still need to calm down. At the very least, I should learn how to face him with a peaceful mind. It was already late at night, and all the residents in the apartment had turned off their lights. There were only a few white street lamps left in front of the apartment building, but they highlighted the bleakness of the night. Chapter 3176. My greatest achievement after going abroad for the past few years was learning to smoke. I learned to smoke only because sometimes when I'm anxious and desperate, I need something to fill the void. These few days, my addiction to smoking has been very strong. I've treated it as a form of spiritual food. Whether it's numbing or decadent, at least it can fill the gap in my heart. The sound of a lighter being ignited was exceptionally clear in the silent night. I took a deep breath, and the smoke came out from the tip of my nose. Out of the corner of my eye, I inadvertently saw a shadow on the ground. I followed the shadow and looked up until I saw a pair of cold eyes that were as deep as the abyss. I was instantly stunned on the spot, at a loss for what to do. Dongyu stood motionless under the street lamp. His tall and straight figure was almost the fulcrum of my line of sight. His handsome face looked even fairer under the light. In my memory, he always had a gentle and elegant temperament. But now this temperament had become a little cold. A pair of cold and deep eyes silently stared at me. His gaze slowly moved down, and finally landed on the cigarette, but that was emitting sparks between my fingers. His appearance caught me off guard. I hadn't even thought about what kind of expression I should use to face him. Just like when I was young and did bad things behind his back, I was caught red-handed. I threw away the cigarette in my hand awkwardly, trying to pretend that nothing had happened. He only looked at me in silence. It was as though he wanted to see enough of the past 8 years in this quiet moment. I felt that he seemed a little unfamiliar. I didn't recognize him anymore. If it weren't for his eyes and brows, which were still the same as in my memory, I wouldn't have been able to recognize this man at first glance. He was the Dongyu I'd been longing for. Dongyu, this name gave me joy and sorrow, but I couldn't love him. I'd been thinking about this for 8 years, but I still couldn't figure it out. But fate was really unfair. I clearly knew that it was impossible between him and me. However, when I came to this world alone, he still had to give me hope and tenderness. Then he used the bloody reality to turn it into a sharp blade, and cut my heart into a bloody pulp. Who asked Dongyu to be the only person I could rely on in this vast world? In his childhood memories, he occupied such a large part of the country. I don't know who else I can rely on other than him. Who else can I miss? If he hadn't been such an important part of my life, I definitely wouldn't have fallen into this fate of eternal damnation. I stood there awkwardly, my hands trembling behind my back as I stared down at my toes. I bit my lips out of habit, so that it wouldn't seem to be trembling too much. I couldn't pretend to be relaxed and calm in front of him like I did with Suchi. I even thought of escaping this place and returning to my rented apartment in Los Angeles, hiding in my turtle shell like a turtle. However, Dongyu's gaze never left my face. It was as if he was frozen in place, or as if time had frozen. He looked at me silently, as if he wanted to carve my facial features into his mind, into his bones. After a long time, he finally opened his mouth and spoke in that extremely familiar tone. Xiachuan. Chapter 3177. How many times had I heard him call my name like this in my dreams? Just like when I was young, I would run in front and he would chase after me angrily, calling my name angrily. Just like when he would greet me at the door after elementary school, and call my name gently with open arms. Just like when I failed an exam in high school, I would take the test paper home and plead with him for a fake autograph with my palms pressed together. He would call my name in disappointment. Just like countless nights when he would sneak into my room and caress my sleeping face. I would secretly open my eyes a little and hear him call my name. Xiachuan, Xiachuan. That voice once overturned rivers and seas in my mind, setting off fierce winds and fierce waves. There had also been countless difficult nights when I recalled it. It was like a silver needle piercing my eardrum, causing me to feel a sharp pain. I had clearly warned myself not to cry easily no matter what, but when I heard him call my name softly, my eyes started to sting. I lowered my head in an extremely sorry state. Taking advantage of the night, I quietly dripped the tears that had welled up in my eyes onto the cement ground under my feet. I secretly pinched my palms so that my voice would sound calmer. Xiachuan. Xiachuan. Perhaps it had been too long since he had called my name, but he kept repeating it. It sounded like he was restraining himself. I gritted my teeth and forced a smile. Brother, I heard you. How many times do you have to call me that? I didn't dare to look up, so I couldn't see the expression on his face. I only heard his deep voice ring out again. Stand there and don't move. As soon as he finished speaking, I heard him take a step forward and walk towards me. I subconsciously retreated until my back was against the wall, and there was nowhere to go. It was only when a pair of slender legs came into view that I clenched my fists. All the blood in my body rushed to my head and my back instantly tensed up. Look up and let me take a good look at you. Brother, I'm tired. I want to rest early. Xiachuan. It's your wedding tomorrow. Don't you need to rest early? Xiachuan. He suddenly reached out and hugged me tightly. He said, Xiachuan, there's something I want to say to you. This sentence is 8 years late. I don't know if you still want to hear it. Dongyu's 8-year-old face seemed to appear in front of me. He stood in front of me and waved at me with a smile. He said mysteriously, Xiachuan, come here. I have a secret that I can only tell you. Curious, I leaned over and stood on tiptoe, leaning over his shoulder. He covered my ears and his warm breath brushed against my earlobes. As he whispered to me, the corners of his lips lifted into a beautiful arc. He looked so innocent and cute. I love little sister the most. I came back to my senses and curled the corners of my lips. Just like when I was young, I stood on my tiptoes and placed my hand gently on his shoulder, putting my ear close to his thin lips. Dongyu covered my ear. In Xiachuan, I love you. My eyes widened. Dongyu's mature and tender words echoed in my ears. I turned to look at him with tears in my eyes. Suddenly, I laughed. I looked at him and tried my best to smile, but my eyes were getting sore. It was as if I couldn't see anything clearly. If I had been young, I would have been overjoyed to hear this. I hugged his shoulders and smiled sweetly and contentedly. Chapter 3178. 8 years had passed. Returning to this city made me feel like I no longer had a foothold here. But Dongyu, thank you. At least in your heart, there was still a place for me. I had waited for these 3 words for 15 years, and then for another 8 years. Perhaps, my youthful obsession had finally been fulfilled. Back then, I had pestered him so much and chased after him for these 3 words. But now that I had matured, hearing these 3 words again did not make me as happy as I had expected. The 15-year-old me longed for an echo of my love, but I received no response. The 23-year-old me hoped that my love would bear fruit, but in the end it did not. As one grew up, so did one's ambition. However, I gradually learned to bear the pain and let go. I came back probably to bid farewell to this relationship. I giggled foolishly and rubbed away my tears with my hand. However, they couldn't stop flowing. Like a broken dam, they kept falling from the corners of my eyes. However, even though I was crying, I was smiling. It felt like I had been waiting for these 3 words for a century. Dongyu sucked in a deep breath of cold air and gazed at me gently with a smile on his face. The curve of his eyes made it seem like he was smiling, but when his gaze landed on my face, it was filled with desperate affection. I saw that his eyes were slightly red. His clear black and white eyes were sparkling. However, he was a 26-year-old man after all. He wouldn't cry so easily like an 18-year-old. I clenched my fists tightly and pinched the corner of my shirt nervously. Pretending to be calm, I said, I saw it in the diary. What you basically wrote in my diary, I wiped away the tears from the corners of my eyes and smiled. I saw it all. I thought of the diary again. The originally blank paper was filled with the words "I miss you" neatly written stroke by stroke with a blue water-based pen. Dongyu's face was a little different from the one that was engraved in my mind. He looked even more robust now. In the past, his facial features were mixed with the feminine lines of a youth. He had delicate features and slender bones. Now he had the heroic spirit of a young man. Especially those sword-like eyebrows. They were perfectly straight and natural. This man was once a young man whom she yearned for day and night. She could never forget him. It was also my nightmare. Every time I dreamed of it, I would wake up abruptly with tears streaming down my face. I had a lot of things I wanted to say to him, but they were stuck in my throat and I couldn't say anything. He seemed to have a lot to say to me, but he didn't say anything from the start to the end. Every girl didn't want to see the man she loved walk into the hall of marriage with another woman hand in hand. It was like a heart attack. But before we get married, can we? Brother. I opened my arms and smiled. Can I hug you? Because of these words, Dongyu's originally well-concealed smile finally cracked. He pulled me into his arms, rubbed my hair, and held my waist tightly. Suddenly, he let out a sorrowful sob, crying like a child. Chapter 3179. When I was young, I would often climb trees on all fours and pick wild fruits to eat. After watching so many wuxia dramas, I felt that these wild fruits might be mysterious elixirs. Eating them would give me a certain chance of immortality. When I picked the unripe green fruit and tasted it in my mouth, it tasted sour and bitter without any sweetness. But this was my youth. Some dreams are destined to remain dreams. Some love is destined to be unattainable. Some promises are like bubbles that burst at a touch. Some lies are so realistic that they can deceive myself. But Dongyu, the worst lie in my life was to lie to myself and say that I don't like you anymore. I closed my eyes and thought that I could forget you. But the tears that flowed didn't lie to me. At the wedding, the church was decorated with fresh flowers and a white veil. It was holy and beautiful. I tidied up the flowers on the arch and turned around to see the bride rushing to the venue with the help of the flower girl. Dongyu was in charge of receiving the guests in the living room while the bride went to the dressing room to touch up her makeup. I walked to the makeup artist with the flowers in my hands and placed a bouquet of roses in a vase. When the bride saw me, she smiled in a friendly manner and pointed at me. "You're In Xiachuan, aren't you?" I turned around and nodded silently. "Dongyu often mentions you." The bride tilted her head and said, "Sometimes even in his dreams, he often calls your name." My back stiffened, but I pretended to be nonchalant and went about my business. "My name is Ning." I know your name, but you have to call me sister-in-law in the future." I turned around and asked with a smile, "Sister-in-law, how did you and Dongyu meet?" She was surprised for a moment that I had obediently addressed her as sister-in-law. When she realized my question, she immediately replied, "University classmate." Indeed. I guessed that with Dongyu's cold personality, his social circle would only be limited to his classmates and colleagues. I tidied up the bouquet seriously and asked tentatively, "You must love my brother very much, right? Otherwise, it would be difficult to tolerate his taciturn personality. Is that how you describe your brother?" Ning silently observed my actions and suddenly chuckled. "Haha, marrying him was like a dream. It felt unreal. I love him very much as he loves you." My hand froze as I stared at her in disbelief. "Are you surprised? Why would I know about this?" Ning stood up and walked to me. There were only the two of us in the dressing room. She walked to my side and suddenly bumped my shoulder gently. "You know what? He has never forgotten you. I know that your position in his heart is extraordinary and irreplaceable. I couldn't help but feel puzzled. If you knew, why did you marry him?" "Because I love him as much as you do. I have no regrets." Ning smiled, but the smile in her eyes was extremely pure. "If you love someone, you will be so humble that you fall into the dust. Even if his heart belongs to someone else, as long as you can protect him, you will naturally accept it. Don't you think it's unfair?" I smirked. "If the man you love doesn't love you back, then this marriage must be very disloyal." "I don't think so." Ning continued. Feelings can be nurtured. However, I know that the only woman he loves deeply will never be with him. To me, isn't that the greatest loyalty? The stunned look on my face became even more obvious. And Ning enunciated each word clearly. I will work hard to make him fall in love with me. At the same time, I will be a good wife, a good daughter-in-law, a good sister-in-law. I smiled calmly, but there was no emotion in my eyes. I wish you all the best. I tidied up the bouquet and put it aside before walking out of the door. Behind me, she suddenly said, I think I'm very lucky. At least, I can marry the man I love. However, I didn't stop for even half a step and just left. I knew that she didn't mean any harm by saying that. She was just trying to prove her love and loyalty to Dongyu. But compared to these words, I had experienced 100 times crueler torture. Outside the church, I stood at the door and raised my head to look at the blue sky. White clouds floated gently. I pinched a rose and played with it with my fingertips. Bit by bit, I plucked off the petals and let them fall to the ground, eventually crumbling into mud. In the end, I still didn't have the courage to witness that scene with my own eyes. I ran out of the door like a deserter, but the vows had officially begun. In the church, the priest's serious voice rang out. And Ning, are you willing to take this man as your husband and enter into a marriage contract with him? In sickness and in health, in poverty and in wealth, will you love him, take care of him, respect him, accept him, and be loyal to him until the end of your life? I lowered my head and took out the ring box from my pocket. I opened it gently. A 1-carat ring lay quietly inside. Brother, when we grow up, will you buy me a ring with a huge diamond inlaid on it like the male leads on TV, and put it on my finger personally? When I was young, I made an innocent wish. Every girl must have a dream about being a bride. I dreamed that one day, I would be able to stand in a holy church and watch him put on my finger with a huge diamond inlaid on it. Then he would elegantly put it on my ring finger, and make a promise to me. However, the ring didn't have to be a 1-carat, and the wedding didn't have to be held in a church. But the man standing opposite me, holding my hand, had to be that person. On the night before our wedding, he took out this exquisite gift box from his pocket and opened it. Under the moonlight, the 1-carat diamond shone charmingly. It was such an unintentional sentence from his childhood, but he remembered it seriously in his heart. With my back against him, I held this small but exquisite box as if it was a treasure. With tears in my eyes, I smiled contentedly. There were so many illusory dreams in life, and one of them had actually come true. I gently took out the ring and carefully put it on my ring finger. My fingers were pressed together as I looked at the diamond ring. I couldn't help but smile and plant a gentle kiss on the diamond. My lips parted slightly, almost in sync with the voice in the church. I do. Dongyu's voice still echoed in my ears. Chapter 3180. Lu Jinyu hurriedly handed the cuddly little ball over to Yin Shirshir. When she was in Yin Shirshir's arms, the little girl was still crying badly. However, compared to when she was in Jiang Shun and Lu Jinyu's arms, she was a little more restrained. Yin Shirshir coaxed her a little, and the rain immediately cleared up. She broke into a smile. When she smiled, her eyes were still filled with tears. Those tears that were like fragments of starlight were contained in her red eye sockets. Her jet-black eyes were like shiny black jade agates. Looking at them, one's heart would soften to the extreme. Her eyes, which had just cried, seemed to be covered by a layer of fog. The corners of her eyes were slightly raised, outlining the beautiful corners of her eyes. She was like an otherworldly little angel. Lu Jinyu and Jiang Shen were about to drool. They were considered to be well-informed and had seen countless people. Many of their friends and relatives had their own fruits of love when they reached the age. However, little Yueyao was definitely the most adorable one they had ever seen. Actually, when the news of Yin Shirshir's pregnancy first spread, they had guessed that with Muyaja and Yin Shirshir's good genes, the daughter would definitely be juicy and beautiful. However, when they saw little Yueyao in full bloom, it was still far beyond their expectations. Jiang Shen was mesmerized by the sight. He was a little regretful. He was young and playful and wasn't in a hurry to find a partner. If he had a wife and a son at this time, he would definitely think of ways to become in-laws with his boss. Such an adorable little princess, who was only a few months old, could already imagine how alluring she would be when she grew up, especially when she cried and smiled with narrowed eyes. That pair of lively eyes could melt one's heart into a puddle of water. However, Lu Jinyu was much more clear-headed than him. He knew that it wasn't easy to become in-laws with his boss. It was obvious to all that old madam loved her daughter dearly. How could she be so easily married to someone else's family and be coveted? She's so young, but she can already recognize people? Jiang Shen found it very interesting. My sister's son only knows how to cry when a stranger hugs him when he's 1 year old. Yu said from the side. Little sis is very sensitive. She won't let anyone hug her. Even if it was us hugging, little sister seemed to have calculated the time. If you hug her for too long, she won't be happy either. Xiao Chen added. Little sister likes me a little more. Every time I hug her, she'll let me hug her a little longer. This means that she prefers me as her brother. When Yu heard this, she was a little unhappy. What nonsense are you talking about? What a self-righteous fellow. My younger sister clearly likes me more. When I was hugging her, she squinted her eyes and smiled. She was so happy. After coaxing her, Yin Shirshir placed her back in the crib. Little did she know that little Yueyao, who was lying in the crib, was probably a little excited when she saw that there were more people around. She waved her little hands and giggled happily. Jiang Shen was curious and quickly took out his phone to take a picture of this loving scene. She looks so good when she smiles. This little girl is so charming. As soon as he finished speaking, he saw her blushing face, as if she was about to do something earth-shattering. He saw her feet in the air and she made a fuss. Then she flipped to the side. Her little feet kicked up, and her whole body flipped over in an instant. Wow. Chapter 3181. Xiao Yichen was surprised as well. Jiang Shen and Lu Jinyu were stunned as well. They had no idea when the little girl had become so capable. She even knew how to turn things around. They saw the little Yueyao flapping her tiny body and sticking her, but out as she lay on the crib with her back facing the sky. Her tiny hands were clenched into fists as she casually grabbed the doll that was placed at the side. She flapped a few more times before she flipped over and lay on the bed. She held the doll with her 2 tiny hands and started waving it around. She babbled and her saliva stained the soft towel. Jiang Shen suddenly asked curiously, "Who's changing this little girl's diaper at home now?" Yin Shirshir suddenly thought of something and actually burst out laughing. Jiang Shen quickly asked what was going on, and why she was laughing for no reason. She then said, "I thought of someone who changed Yueyao's diaper for the first time." He didn't need to guess to know that she was referring to the eldest son. Jiang Shen widened his eyes in surprise. The eldest son knows how to change diapers? Yes. It's not like you don't know that he's been longing for a daughter. Look, now that she's born, he's doting on her like a treasure. It's as if he can't wait to do everything himself. When I told him to change the diaper, he wouldn't be able to take it. When I asked him to do it, he was full of confidence and thought nothing of it. He said that changing a diaper was no big deal. In the end, when I undid the diaper, his face was all scrunched up. It smelled so bad. After all, the child was still young. She couldn't control her urine and feces. This diaper couldn't be wrapped all the time. If it got dirty, someone had to change it. In the end, Muyaja didn't think it was a big deal. However, when he undid the diaper and smelled it, the smell was unforgettable. According to Muyaja's own description, at that moment, the smell was so bad that he wanted to go to the heavens. Although the smell was a little unpleasant, it didn't stop Muyaja from loving the little princess. After smelling it a lot, he got used to it. In the beginning, when they were still in the hospital, most of the time, it was the confinement nanny who took care of them. When they returned home, he did it himself. He said that his daughters but smelled good. Yin Shirshir didn't know whether to laugh or cry. In the end, even she felt a little jealous. She watched as Muyaja took good care of the little princess, regardless of whether it was feeding her milk, comforting her, or changing her diapers. She gradually got used to it and was no longer so clumsy. Things started to go smoothly. Sometimes, when the two of them finally had some time together, she would hug him and joke that she had been born in the wrong body. When Muyaja asked her why, she said half seriously, "Why do I want to be your daughter more than your wife? Papa Yaja." As soon as she said this, Muyaja pressed her down and pecked the corner of her lips lightly. He said playfully, "It seems that I have indeed neglected someone these few days." He served his daughter well, but neglected his wife. "Madam, how do you want me to make up for it?" Yin Shirshir punched his chest. "You have to go to work and wake up at night to take care of the little one. How can you still be so energetic?" "The moment I see you, I'm full of energy." Chapter 3182. After giving birth to her daughter, she had completely become a little worm who only cared about eating, drinking, and sleeping well. This man had taken care of all the chores, so she felt that there was nothing else to do. Yu said, "Mommy, you can be like other rich ladies and go shopping at the mall when you have nothing to do. You stay at home all day. No wonder you have so much free time." "I don't like to play with those rich ladies who are too effeminate," Yin Shirshir said and continued, "I'm happier and more free at home." Lu Jinyu and Jiang Shen did not dare to stay for too long. They had come out this time without telling a certain man. If Muyaja found out that they had traveled thousands of miles during their lunch break to secretly touch his daughter, he would definitely be furious. Seeing that it was almost time to go to work, they hurriedly said goodbye and hurriedly returned to the office dejectedly. In the evening, Muyaja returned home after work. Yin Shirshir went to the entrance to welcome him. He hurriedly kissed her cheek and eagerly walked to the crib. Yin Shirshir stayed where she was, feeling flustered. She turned around and saw a certain man happily walking to the crib. He bent down and hurriedly carried the little princess in his arms. He did not even look at the little girl who was sleeping soundly at the moment. He did not care. He had not seen his daughter for a day and missed her dearly. He did not know why, but after an entire day of work, whenever he thought of his daughter's pink and tender face, his heart seemed to be filled with something. This was probably the feeling of happiness. Once there was weight in his heart and someone he cared about, his heart would have long drifted back home while he was in the office. This did not mean that he was biased and neglected the mother and children because of the little princess. It was just that Yu was a little tsundere and did not rely on him that much. She was a mischievous child. As for Xiaoyichen, perhaps because he had been too strict with his son since he was young, Xiaoyichen had always respected his father. As for his little Yueyao, every time she saw him, she would reveal an extremely dependent expression. When he hugged her, she would also look at him with her bright eyes. Her two small hands would occasionally pat his cheeks, and at other times, she would tug at his tie. It always gave him a feeling of being deeply relied on. Men like to be relied on. Muyaja hugged Yueyao lovingly. He looked up and asked, "Have you changed Yueyao's diapers?" "I've already changed it for her." Yin Shirshir walked to his side and sat down. She rested her chin on his shoulder and looked at him. Little Yueyao was still asleep. When he carried her, his movements were very careful, afraid that he would wake her up. Now she was like an obedient kitten, snuggling in his arms. Her mouth was moving, and she was even bubbling. Yin Shirshir reached out with her finger, popped the bubble and laughed. "She's sleeping soundly." Muyaja gently patted her back. He looked up and met her eyes, and the corners of his lips curled up. He suddenly said, "For the past few days, I've been discussing the details of the wedding with the wedding planner. However, the theme of the wedding hasn't been decided yet. When they came back, they wanted me to ask you what theme and style you would like for the wedding." "Style?" "The decorations of the venue," Yin Shirshir said. "How would I know about these things?" "You can decide." Chapter 3183. I don't really understand. I don't know what the theme and style are. Muyaja changed the topic and asked her, "Do you like Chinese weddings or Western weddings?" This question stumped her. Chinese weddings were red and gold, or red and black. It was steady and passionate, traditional yet novel, and extremely solemn. Most importantly, Chinese weddings had phoenix coronets and red robes. The classical charm was hard for many women to resist. Speaking of China's traditional culture, there was still a lot of charm to it. Imagine wearing a gorgeous Han costume, phoenix coronets, and red robes. It must be a unique and beautiful scene. However, most weddings nowadays were Western weddings. The most eye-catching feature of Western weddings was the holy and beautiful wedding dress. Holy and Snow White. Whether it was the style of a fishtail, or the style of a princess's tutu, Every wedding dress had its own characteristics. Flowers, an arch, a sacred and solemn vow, a custom-made wedding cake, and a champagne tower were also not bad. Yin Shirshir was a little conflicted, because whether it was a Chinese wedding or a Western wedding, she liked them both. Yin Shirshir frowned and was a little hesitant. I like the solemnity of Chinese weddings, and the elegance of Western weddings. I like phoenix coronets and red robes, and I also like holy and pure wedding dresses. So if you ask me whether a Western wedding or a Chinese wedding, I like both. It's really hard to choose. Since it's hard to choose, then let's do both styles together. Huh. Yin Shirshir was a little stunned. Oh my god, these two styles don't fit together. How can they be done together? An outdoor lawn wedding and an indoor Chinese wedding. Since you like both, it's not like you don't have the qualifications. Yin Shirshir asked again. What about you? Which kind of wedding do you prefer? Muyaja smiled. His gaze fell on the sleeping face of the little one in his arms. He said gently, as long as the person standing in front of me and swearing to me is you, any style is fine. He really didn't care about the style. He liked the person who walked into the wedding hall with him. When the day came, he was afraid that when she walked in front of him, the whole world would be overshadowed in that instant. Whether it was the Chinese style or the Western style, he probably didn't have time to care about it. In his eyes, there was only her. He couldn't see anything clearly. He couldn't see anything. On that day, at that moment, what could be more beautiful and eye-catching than her standing in front of him? How could Yin Shirshir know what he was thinking? Seeing that he threw the question back at her, she started to feel conflicted again. Hubby, am I being too greedy? You like the Western style, but you also want the Chinese style? Before she finished speaking, the little guy in her bosom suddenly kicked his legs. She didn't know if this was a dream, or if he was dreaming about something, but after kicking twice in a row, it actually woke her up. Before she even opened her eyes, her tears had already fallen. It was probably because he had been sleeping well, and was woken up by her. The little guy was also a little angry when he woke up. He couldn't wake up and was in a terrible mood. He groaned a few times and actually cried out in grievance. Muyaja hurriedly coaxed her. He kissed her forehead, patted her back and said in a low voice, Yueyao, don't cry. Yueyao, don't cry. Chapter 3184. It's all your fault. Yin Shirshir blamed him. You wanted to hug her the moment you came back. She's still sleeping. It's not like you don't know that the little one cries when she's not awake. Muyaja didn't think much of it. It's been a hard day. Isn't it only right to come back and hug my little princess? As he spoke, he gently kissed little Yueyao's forehead as a form of consolation. Seeing that she was crying, he coaxed her patiently without the slightest bit of impatience or helplessness like a newbie stay-at-home dad. He was already able to handle little Yueyao's cries with ease. He suddenly took out a small red brocade box from his pocket. It looked very exquisite. He handed the box to her and gestured. Open it and take a look. Yin Shirshir took it curiously and looked at him. Puzzled, she asked, What's this? Open it and you'll know. Yin Shirshir raised her eyebrows and opened the box. Inside the box lay a small but exceptionally exquisite longevity lock, made of pure silver. Longevity locks, also known as longevity strands, were usually worn during a 100-day banquet or when a child was 1 year old. The longevity lock was worn to prevent diseases and spirits from invading and harming the child. In ancient times, people believed that once a child wore a lock, he or she would be able to grow up safe and sound. Longevity locks were mostly made of pure silver, and were engraved with the words long life and riches. People believed that locks were sealing devices. Once a door or box was locked, it could only be opened with a key. Therefore, it was believed that longevity locks could lock up health and life. This was a rather superstitious way of saying it. At first, Muyaja didn't pay much attention to this. After all, he didn't have much experience and didn't understand many of the more traditional rules and sayings. However, on the 100-day banquet, a female guest suddenly asked, Why didn't you give the child a longevity lock? When Muyaja heard this, he was a little puzzled. What was a longevity lock? Thus, the upper-class lady explained it to him. Muyaja didn't think much of it. However, when he returned home from work today, he didn't know why, but he went to the jewelry store and chose a nice design. He bought a longevity lock for his little Yueyao. Longevity lock? Yin Shirshir was surprised and said coquettishly, "Didn't you say that these are all superstitions and not to be believed?" Mu Yaja's face turned red with embarrassment. Then he explained seriously, "Although it's a superstition, it's reasonable that it exists. I'd rather believe it." Oh. Yin Shirshir took the longevity lock in her hand and rubbed it with her fingers. She said, "You can't just buy a longevity lock just because you want to." When Yueyao was 12 years old, he still had to remember to ask for a golden key to restore it. Otherwise, it wouldn't be effective and sincere enough. Actually, I think that there are some traditions that you either don't believe in. If you believe in them, you have to believe in them sincerely and revere them. As she said this, she put the longevity lock around little Yueyao's neck. As she put it on for her, she made a sincere wish in her heart. "I hope that Yueyao will be safe and sound in this life, and live a long life of wealth and prosperity." She didn't know why, but when she fastened the longevity lock, little Yueyao blinked and stopped crying. How strange. Chapter 3185. She sucked on her finger, looked at Yin Shirshir, and then looked at Mu Yaja. Suddenly, she was so excited that she danced. "Yaya!" She reached out with her saliva and slapped Mu Yaja's face. Her saliva got all over his face. Yin Shirshir was amused. Mu Yaja also laughed. He looked at Yueyao, and then at her. She won't cry when she's locked. Sometimes some things are really hard to explain. I always feel like there's a deep mystery behind it. She's just like that. She cries one moment, and is happy the next. She loves it when you and little Jia hug her the most. Especially you. No matter how aggrieved she cries, she'll stop crying when she's in your arms. As Yin Shirshir spoke, she harumphed indignantly. "They say that daughters are close to their fathers. I think this is true. It's not a lie at all. Aren't you close to her?" Yin Shirshir tilted her head and said, "It's not that we aren't close. It's just that when she cries, I'll coax her for a long time, but she won't smile. Do you know? Sometimes she's very adorable. When she's lying in the crib alone and Yu suddenly sticks her head in, she'll get a fright and start crying. Sometimes she's very smart. She knows that when she cries, many people will fight to hug her. But when it comes to hugging her, she recognizes people very well. If the person hugging her isn't the person she wants, she'll continue crying. For example, Huajin. Sometimes when Huajin hugs her, she'll still cry. It's only when little Jia hugs her that she slowly stops crying. Isn't it a good thing that the child is smart? If she's as dumb as Xiao Chen, then she'll be done for." Mu Yaja felt that it was only right. Xiao Chen was passing by the living room when he suddenly heard these words. It was as if a huge black pot had been smashed on the back of his head. He felt as if he had been shot even though he was lying down. He covered his chest and complained unhappily, "Daddy, you're talking bad about me behind my back again." Yu walked past Xiao Chen and saw that Mu Yaja was carrying little Yueyao like a slave to his daughter. She suddenly fanned the flames and said, "Xiao Chen, look, ever since your little sister was born, your position in Daddy's heart has been getting lower and lower." Upon hearing this, Xiao Chen felt even more aggrieved. Unable to contain his anger, he threatened, "Daddy, don't forget that you have to work during the day. When I was at home, I talked bad about you in my sister's ears every day. How dare you?" Mu Yaja took his words seriously and glared at him. "You're not allowed to speak ill of Daddy in front of Yueyao. Then why did you call me dumb in front of little sister?" Xiao Chen pursed his lips and said, "If little sister finds out that I'm dumb and bullies me when I grow up, then no one will dote on me and love me. How old is little sister? How would she understand if I called you dumb? Since little sister doesn't understand, then I'll continue to speak ill of you in the future. Anyway, Daddy has already said that little sister is too young to understand." At this moment, his mind was spinning rapidly. Mu Yaja couldn't argue with him, so he could only take a step back and say, "Daddy was wrong. Daddy won't call you dumb in the future." Xiao Chen was finally satisfied. His eyes were sharp as he curiously ran over to Yueyao. He stared straight at the shiny silver longevity lock around her neck and asked curiously, "What is this?" A longevity lock. Yin Shirshir explained the meaning of the longevity lock to him. Chapter 3186. I have one. Mommy told me that she gave it to me when I was 1 year old. But I'm allergic to it, so I don't wear it often. Xiao Yichen was even more dejected. He lowered his head dejectedly. When Mu Yaja saw this, he felt a little upset. He owed this little guy too much. He admitted that ever since Mu Yichen was born, the Mu family had provided him with the best food and clothing. However, among the 3 children, the Mu family had given him the least care and attention. Not to mention the longevity lock, Mu Yaja rarely participated in Xiao Yichen's birthday. He rarely planned or prepared anything for him. Most of the time, it was the servants who prepared everything and reminded him in advance. Then he would send someone to buy a birthday present. If Xiao Yichen wanted something, he would send someone to buy it for him. Mu Yichen's personality was actually very lively. This could be seen when he was 1 year old. However, at that time, Mu Yaja didn't have much experience in taking care of children. He was also very strict with him. Children loved to play and were very active. Sometimes, it was normal for him to accidentally bump into things or break things. However, at that time, Mu Yaja did not know how to educate his son. Sometimes he was so concerned that his son would break something. He was worried that he would hurt himself again if he was careless again. Hence, he punished him by making him face the wall to reflect on his mistakes. However, the child subconsciously thought that he had caused trouble and made Mu Yaja unhappy. He didn't realize that this was a father's concern. After all, the child was still young. In terms of understanding, it was difficult for him to understand a father's love and care. It was also difficult for him to understand the concern of an elder. When he was a little older, Mu Yaja threw him into the special training camp to suffer. After returning from the special training camp, Xiao Yichen seemed to have changed into a different person. He went from being lively and active to being reserved like a little iceberg. In reality, he was just trying to equip himself. When the mother and son reunited and returned to Yin Shirshir's side, his most primitive honesty and innocence gradually revealed itself. Why else would it be said that when it came to family, no matter who the child left, the child couldn't do it? His father was his backer, his sense of security. Mother is the harbor, the greatest warmth. Without any one of them, home would no longer be home. Looking at Xiao Yichen's disappointed face, Mu Yaja realized that he had always neglected Xiao Yichen. In the past, it was because he was a new father and did not know how to manage the relationship between him and his child. When the mother and son reunited, he returned to Yin Shirshir's side and spent time with Yu. Xiao Yichen considered himself to be the older brother, so he learned to be mature and knew how to take care of Yu. However, everyone had forgotten that even though Xiao Yichen was the older brother, he was only a few minutes older than Yu. Furthermore, he was only 7 years old. The crybaby got candy, but the mature one's feelings were always neglected. Mu Yichen didn't know what his daddy was thinking. When he saw that his daddy was looking at him, he thought that he was being willful. He immediately said, I didn't say that I must have a longevity lock. I was just teasing daddy. Come here. Mu Yaja called out to him. His tone instantly became gentle. Xiao Yichen was a little bashful. What's wrong? Chapter 3187. Come here. When Mu Yaja called again, Xiao Yichen walked over awkwardly. Mu Yaja held his hand and pulled him in front of him. Then he brushed his hair aside and planted a kiss on his forehead. Daddy will make it up to you, okay? Xiao Yichen's face turned strangely red all of a sudden. He thought to himself, what's wrong with daddy? Why is he being so gentle to me for no reason? He couldn't get used to it. Upon hearing that he was going to make it up to him, Xiao Yichen was naturally delighted. He quickly nodded and said, Okay. This way, my sister Yu, and I will all have longevity locks. When Yin Shirshir heard this, she thought it was a little strange. She rebuked him and said, Didn't you give Xiao Yichen a longevity lock when he was 1 year old? She had wanted to give Yueyao a longevity lock when he was 1 year old. It was too early for the 100-day banquet, so she wasn't in a hurry to give it to him. However, she didn't expect this man to give Yueyao one even though he didn't seem to care. She was a little surprised by his thoughtfulness. However, when she heard that Xiao Yichen didn't have one, she was a little surprised. She thought that Xiaoyichen had one, but he wouldn't wear it like Yu. However, Muyaja said, I didn't know there was such a thing as a longevity lock. You're a father after all. You can't ignore the older ones. Otherwise, you'll be suspected of being biased. Yin Shishir harumphed. She was obviously on Xiaoyichen's side. Muyaja humbly listened to her advice. Madam is right. Yin Shishir was amused when she heard this. She and Xiaoyichen looked at each other and smiled. At night, the family showered and went to bed. Yin Shishir lifted the blanket and moved towards Muyaja. She hugged him and said, Hubby. Don't you think that you didn't care enough for Xiaoyichen when he was young? Muyaja nodded and heard her say, Today, I saw Xiaoyichen's face looking a little lonely when he saw that little Yueyao also had a longevity lock. My heart aches when I look at it. There was a hint of reproach in her tone. Muyaja patted her back gently, but didn't deny it. When Muichen was young, I really didn't care much about him. At that time, there weren't any capable assistants in the consortium. Lu Jinyu and Jiang Shen were still young and inexperienced, so I had to take care of a lot of work. Hence, I rarely had time to spare on him. Yin Shishir expressed her understanding. After all, no matter how capable a man was, he didn't have 3 heads and 6 arms, nor was he made of iron. From a certain point of view, Muyaja was indeed good at educating children, but it was also remarkable. At least, Xiaoyichen wasn't like those spoiled rich second-generation heirs. This proved that Muyaja had put in a lot of effort in educating children. However, as a father's love wasn't as gentle as a mother's. She had been absent from Xiaoyichen's childhood. Without a mother's love, she felt guilty. Muyaja continued. Perhaps it's because the circumstances are different now. At that time, Xiaoyichen's definition of me was that I had this child under Grandpa's orders to continue the family line. But now that I think about it, I feel guilty. Chapter 3188. Muyaja said, As a father, I didn't fulfill my responsibilities. But I'll be more careful in the future. I don't want the little guy to feel neglected again. As he spoke, he covered her with a thin blanket. The weather had turned cold, and he was worried that she would catch a cold. She took note of his silent thoughtfulness. She hugged his shoulders and planted a kiss on the corner of his lips. Good night. The next day, when Muyaja got off work, he went to the jewelry store and chose a longevity lock of another design. When he got home, he didn't carry Yueyao as he usually did. Instead, he carried the gift box mysteriously and walked to his room. Xiaoyichen was playing a game on his phone. When he walked over, he saw that he was controlling an exquisite character to push a tower. Muyaja didn't know what game it was, but he didn't disturb him. When the word victory appeared on the screen, Xiaoyichen turned around and was shocked by the man who suddenly appeared behind him. Daddy. He was so scared that he patted his chest lightly with his hand and said with lingering fear, Daddy, why are you standing behind me without saying anything? When did you come back? Not long ago. I saw that you were playing a game, so I didn't disturb you. Muyaja patted his head and asked, What game are you playing? Oh. Muichen continued. You won't understand even if I tell you. Have you heard of Mobile Legends? Muyaja raised his eyebrows. He didn't play games, so how could he have heard of this game? Xiaoyichen obediently put his phone in the drawer and kept it well. He usually played games very happily, but he knew when to stop. When the whole family was around, he would never play with his phone continuously. After all, the only time the whole family could gather together was at night. Xiaoyichen only played games when he was bored. When the whole family was around, he wouldn't play. Yu was the same. No matter how busy he was, he would put down all his work as soon as Muyaja returned home. Muyaja took out a box from his pocket and opened it in front of him. Xiaoyichen looked at him curiously as he took out a longevity lock from the box and strung it with a red string. This is... Xiaoyichen was pleasantly surprised. Is this the longevity lock you put on your sister yesterday? Yeah. Muyaja continued. Daddy was careless in the past and forgot to put one on you. Little Yichen glanced at him reproachfully from the corner of his eyes before his lips curled into a warm smile. It's not bad that you remembered to put one on me now. He stood up and obediently stood in front of Muyaja. He was now as tall as the man's waist, but for the sake of convenience, Muyaja still had to kneel on one knee in front of him and fasten the longevity lock around his neck. After he fastened it, Xiao Yichen pinched the longevity lock with a satisfied smile on his face. "Thank you, Daddy." He hugged his shoulders and gently kissed him on the cheek. Muyaja suddenly thought of something. "Xiao Yichen, I have something to discuss with you." "Yeah. I'm going to try on gowns with Mommy tomorrow. You and you stay at home and take good care of your sister, okay?" Chapter 3189. Muyaja flicked him on the forehead. "Idiot. What other gown could it be? Of course, it's Mommy's gown for the wedding." Xiao Yichen held his forehead in pain. However, his eyes lit up when he heard that they were going to try on the gown for the wedding. "Wow. Have you decided on the wedding plan?" "Yes. Your mommy and I agreed that it would be more meaningful to have the wedding in a traditional Chinese style." Xiao Yichen was surprised. "A traditional Chinese style? Does that mean that Daddy is going to wear a very loose traditional Chinese costume like the ones on TV? The planner suggested that I wear a suit and she wear a traditional Chinese costume." Muyaja added, "Your little sister can't be alone at home, so I won't be bringing you guys along. When we come back, I'll show you how the gown will look like." Xiao Yichen clapped his hands happily. During dinner, Muyaja told Yu about this. Yu was overjoyed when he heard that he would be at home taking care of his little sister. He promised that he would take good care of his little sister. Muyaja was very assured that the two little rascals would be guarding little Yueyao. Hence, the next day he left the house very early with Yin Shishir. Xiao Yichen woke up very early, but Yu woke up even earlier than him. He was already in the living room and was holding little Yueyao in his arms. Xiao Yichen felt a little indignant when he saw this. "Why are you up so early?" "I went to bed earlier than you, so naturally, I woke up earlier." As Yu said this, he thought that if he didn't wake up earlier, Xiao Yichen would hold little Yueyao first. Would he still have a chance then? He couldn't beat him, so he could only take the initiative. Xiao Yichen pursed his lips and sat down beside Yu. He looked at Yueyao, who was still sleeping in his arms. When he saw the little girl nestled in his arms, he couldn't help but want to tease her. Thus, he took the sterilized pacifier and rubbed it against her mouth. In her dreams, Yueyao could vaguely feel a familiar shape. She subconsciously opened her small cherry mouth and licked it. Then she sucked on the pacifier with her eyes closed, enjoying the taste. Ha! Yu was amused by her adorable reaction. He looked at Xiao Yichen and smiled. Suddenly, he thought of something and asked, "Has little sister's favorite toy been sterilized?" "Not yet." "Go." Yu hurriedly urged. "When little sister wakes up, it will be too late for her to play with her toys." Xiao Yichen was extremely unwilling to be sent to work. He still wanted to see his little sister's sleeping face. Such a beautiful sleeping face was monopolized by this fellow. How could he not feel good in his heart? However, on second thought, Xiao Yichen still went happily when he remembered that he was working for his little sister. When he was done sterilizing the toy and came back with it, little Yueyao had already woken up. Yu carried her to the crib, then took a hot towel and carefully wiped her face. Little Yueyao had a full sleep, so she was especially energetic. She kicked her legs as if she was pedaling a bicycle. At this moment, the sun had risen outside the window. Chapter 3190. Okay. But we'll have to wait until we're done feeding her and changing her diapers. Yu nodded. The two little guys busied themselves again. After they were done feeding her and changing her diapers, they placed little Yueyao in the stroller. Then they placed little Yueyao's favorite toy in the stroller and pushed it out the door. Although the stroller wasn't tall, Yu wasn't as tall as Xiao Yichen, so Xiao Yichen was in charge of pushing the stroller. Yin Shishir had moved to Yin Shanshi to take care of her pregnancy. After she returned home from the confinement center, the whole family moved back to Xiangti Walk. The main reason was that Xiangti Walk was a bungalow with a garden, so it wasn't very big. Moreover, she missed the garden full of Chinese roses. After living there for so long, she had gotten used to living there. Xiangti Walk had a huge garden. The residents who lived there would take a stroll in the garden every morning when the weather was good. Xiao Yichen pushed the stroller and walked halfway out the door. Suddenly he thought of something and said, "Oh, I forgot to bring my milk bottle. I'll go back and get it." Yu Yu nodded and pushed the stroller to the side of the stone bench. Then he sat on the stone bench. In the stroller, little Yueyao hugged the toy with both hands. She loved it so much that she couldn't put it down. Her clear black and white eyes seemed to have a mind of their own. As she blinked, her eyelashes fluttered like the wings of a butterfly. She was extremely mesmerizing. Yu Yu was mesmerized just by looking at her blinking eyes. She was so mesmerized by the toy that she was playing with it. It was as though she was extremely satisfied with the toy in her hands. Children were especially innocent by nature, and were easily satisfied. Yu Yu lay beside the stroller and lowered her head to watch her play. Unlike other children, the little Yueyao was especially quiet. Usually, when she had a toy in her hand, she would ignore everything else around her. She would hug the toy and play with it for a long time. Yu Yu felt a little lonely, so he said to her, "Yueyao, oh Yueyao, is this toy that fun?" He was a little jealous. Although he was the one who designed